Happy Hump Day, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700. 92.1 FM on the ESPN 700 app, on YouTube, wherever you find your podcast. We are everywhere, and we appreciate you joining us every day. The show today and every day is brought to you by our friends at Les Schwab Tires. Tires, wheels, accessories, air fresheners, windshield wipers. They got whatever it is you need for the car you drive. Stop by your local Les Schwab. The pros there are going to get the job done right the first time. Multiple locations all up and down the Wasatch Front. They're always good to us. They will be good to you. Tell them OC sent you when you go see Les Schwab for a new set of tires. We have a loaded up show today. Even more so than what we record those little teases. We tell you what's coming tomorrow. We skipped out on a couple of things. Alema Teo is going to join us in like 15 minutes, right off the top. Jason Kreis. We're going to talk to Adam Rittenberg, ESPN College Football Insider. He was part of a piece done grading the off seasons, basically, of every team in college football, or I should say in the Power Four, because that's the college football you care about. He's going to give us some insight on where he's got the Utes and other teams in the Big 12. Brogan Houston to talk Utah Mammoth. Raphael Barlow, NBA draft consultant, host of the NBA Big Board podcast. And BYU has hired a new athletic director, so we will check in with Jerem Jordan at 1:30. That's a lot. It's a lot of stuff going on. That means James Peterson, I guess you just don't get to talk today? Is that what you were planning? You didn't want to say anything, so you were like, I'll just book 1,000 guests. Is your throat hurting? Have you lost your voice?
It's fine. No, it's no. I'm gonna say BYU doesn't want me to talk today because they decided to hire their athletic director, Brian Santiago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, he's been in the athletic department for a long time. Kind of a sidekick, a right-hand man, a Robin to the Batman of Tom Holmoe. It was, I think, a natural progression potentially for them. So
they didn't need the national search that they used.
Well, I think in all seriousness,
I'm being tongue-in-cheek. You do the national search.
You got to do it because it's
see what
a big
other
job,
options are out there. Yeah.
Right? I mean, there were a lot of people who thought that when Chris Hill retired, Utah's ex-athletic director would just be someone who was elevated from within the program, and it didn't work out that way, right? So you always got to do the national search, but we'll get to that later on the show. The NBA playoffs are getting, I think, more and more interesting. What an incredible game last night between the Denver Nuggets and the Oklahoma City Thunder. There's a lot of reasons we could be critical of the NBA, especially because they're fixing their draft lottery and the predetermined and scripted outcomes are forced upon all of us.
Still on that.
Just want to make sure everyone knows where we stand.
By the way,
we stand collectively as a show, by the way.
Yeah, I suppose.
Co-signed by my producer, James Peterson, who, at least for these 3 hours, has to do what I say.
Yeah, I suppose it has to be co-signed by me, boss, for these 3 hours. By the way, I'm not near as active on Twitter as I used to be, so I get the old notification that say, "Hey, did you see this?" almost daily, when you don't log on for 3 hours or more. And I saw Ryan Smith tweeted yesterday morning, way after everyone else saw it, that he was still angry. He went for a run, audibly screamed, and then said, "This is Utah," all caps. And he said everything's going to be okay.
Okay,
so Ryan Smith is with us.
Okay, Ryan.
Is what he's trying to portray there. He is with all of us who were hurting yesterday, continuing to hurt because of the way the lottery did not work out in the Jazz's favor. I don't know if you saw that. I laughed this
Woke
morning.
up frustrated.
Yeah.
Went for a run. Audibly screamed. Sun peeked over the mountains. Ran into a fellow disappointed Jazz fan. Remembered this is Utah. So getting back on the horse with the best fans in the league, because it's what we do here. Goal doesn't change. I think this tweet would be improved if you stated clearly what the goal is. Because the goal this year was to tank and get the number 1 pick, Ryan.
So it doesn't change. So it doesn't change.
Goal
that
doesn't
means
change, dog.
next year we're doing the same
Goal
thing.
doesn't change. DeBonsa or bust.
I do like how he did it in like a poetic form too. He wrote it almost like
It's an iambic pentameter.
I'm like, all right.
He's writing.
He's one of us, guys.
He's writing frustrated haikus on Twitter.
Yes. As Jerem Jordan likes to say, who we're going to have on at 1:30, as you said, to react to Brian Santiago's hiring as BYU's new AD. As he likes to say on BYU Sports Nation and here on the show, one of us. One of us.
Here's the thing. Ryan Smith, I'm glad you pointed this out to me. Ryan Smith has this interesting thing going on right now where he is pulled in two directions, right? A week before the NBA draft lottery, he got the best news possible about his NHL team. And his NHL team, the Utah Mammoth, are on the opposite end of the spectrum right now, the Utah Jazz. So everything's pointing up, right direction. Everyone's happy with that product right now. It's all good. You own that. That's also yours. I really would love to get him on the show and inject some truth serum and see how he actually feels about this juxtaposition of the Utah Mammoth, which is phenomenal, fun, cool, new, interesting, but it is not the heritage product or brand for Utah, and that's the Utah Jazz. He grew up, Ryan Smith, the billionaire owner of the Utah Jazz, grew up rooting for the Utah Jazz. I think it's safe to say that is a cause that is closer to his heart, and that is going exactly as wrong as it can go at this moment. So you've got, oh, my goodness, I'm happy with what's going on in the NHL world. There's no way I could be happy about what's going on in the NBA world, especially if you're the owner. You got to feel like right now the NHL loves you as an owner, and you got to feel like the NBA hates you as an owner. And, of course, when you wake up frustrated and you go for a run and you're a billionaire, your relationship with all of this is quite different than that of the fan. Even though you are a
scream
fan.
In the mountains or wherever he's running.
Can you imagine you're down there? I think he still lives in Provo, right? You're down there in Provo. You're running along the Provo River Trail, and you just see some guy with a lot of money and kind of a bad dye job in his hair yelling. You're like, uh-oh, what's his problem? Oh, it's Ryan Smith. He's mad about the draft lottery. You can only be so mad when you wake up and you're just like, I love these. I'm so passionate about this particular cause. And even though it went so poorly, I can get on my private jet and fly wherever I want to make myself feel better. It's just
finish
a little
my
bit,
run.
It's just a little bit different. You know, it's just your problems are a little bit different.
One of us.
Yes. Okay,
one
sure.
of us.
More money, more problems. I don't know if that's the case here.
Oh, man.
But T's and P's to you, Ryan Smith. This is Utah, baby.
I love
maybe stay off Twitter. It's
my favorite part was the all caps. This is Utah, like, and the audible scream and the all caps. This is Utah.
My favorite part is
tie.
getting back on the horse with the best fans in the league. I actually don't think a lot of the fans are going to get back on the horse with you next year, Ryan.
He should have said getting back on the Mammoth.
I don't think that there are a lot of people who are like, yep, let's climb back on this horse with the owner. I think that there are a lot of people who are going to be kind of casually watching the horse run around the paddock with a little bit of a side eye. Like, was that horse being crazy again? What's the horse doing? They're waiting to see what happens with the horse, Ryan. People are not enthusiastic about climbing back on this horse right now. Not the best fans in the league. Anyway, Sports Illustrated. Do we like Sports Illustrated collectively as a publication? I think so. Mostly.
I honestly don't read it much anymore, OC. I can't say I dislike it. I know that the quality and the direction it's gone in, a lot of old school sports fans are very unhappy with it.
You mean because their new ownership group fired every single established writer and journalist that they had working for them in order to save money?
But I read ESPN, I read The Athletic, and our local writers at the
You mean
Trib
The Athletic, where most of those writers that were fired from Sports Illustrated ended up?
That's a good point.
Yes.
So maybe I don't like Sports Illustrated anymore because I don't put any attention to it anymore.
Well, look, a lot of people, a lot of Utah fans are gonna if you like Sports Illustrated right now, you're not gonna like Sports Illustrated after this conversation. They put out their college football primers, right? The way too early off-season, preseason previews for the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12. Interestingly enough, this is how Sports Illustrated shakes out on the power structure of the Big 12 Conference. The number one championship contender, Tier 1, standing alone, according to SI, is Arizona State. I understand why people feel that way. I think there's always an underestimation of how difficult it is to repeat as conference champions, especially in a league that is characterized by parity. But Arizona State earned all the goodwill that they're getting right now with an incredible performance, exceeding expectations, outkicking the coverage. They did everything right last year, basically, on their way to a Big 12 championship. And I cannot help but like Kenny Dillingham because of the way that he runs his program, how passionate he is about the game, his young energy, and the fact that that is a hometown boy at his hometown school. It's a fun story. It's cool. It's only a fun story the 11 weeks out of the year that I don't have to watch them try to beat Utah. But beyond that, I'm okay with the love that Arizona State is getting right now. It's deserved as at least a little pat on the back, a little feather in the cap.
It's kind of the privilege of being the defending champ.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Even if you
and it's the privilege of being a defending champ whose starting quarterback returns.
Yes, the quarterback returning, their top receiver returning, their best player is not returning.
Yeah,
but
a
about
lot of their
everything else,
defenses, yeah,
just about all the other production, like important production, is returning besides Cam Scadaboo. So
behind Arizona State, again, standing alone atop the mountain as the conference championship favorite, according to Sports Illustrated, is a second tier of power teams. Baylor Bears, BYU Cougars, Iowa State Cyclones, Kansas State Wildcats, Texas Tech Red Raiders. On a third tier, characterized as aiming high, which is just patronizing. It's just like, oh, cute.
Aiming
don't
high.
Don't give up on your dreams, kids. That's they call the second tier dark horses, which again, bad characterization.
Yeah, the third tier is dark horse.
Third tier is dark horse. In this case, third tier is aiming high.
Aiming high.
Don't give up, guys. They've got Kansas, TCU, and Utah. So according to Sports Illustrated, Utah is no better than 8th best right now. Excuse me, in the Big 12 conference.
At least they're aiming high.
Battling for a bowl, which is okay.
That's
credit where it's due. That's a good place to put some of these teams.
It's a very optimistic way of putting it.
Arizona Wildcats, UCF, Cincinnati, Colorado, Houston, and Oklahoma State. And then building for next year, which just means is like a friendly way of saying you stink, is West Virginia. So
they're the only one in that tier.
They're the only one. Arizona State is alone at the top, and West Virginia is catching the strays all the way at the bottom. Like, we don't think you're battling for a bowl game. Abandon all hope. You're done already.
This might sound like, how do you not know this guy who covers sports? But Noah Fafita, still around at Arizona? Or did he leave?
Noah Fafita is 21 years old and still will be the signal caller at the University of Arizona. It feels like.
Do we think he's gonna have 2 bad years in a row after what we saw 2 years in a row? I'm not sure about that.
I think that the question with Noah Fafita is whether or not he's the right kind of fit with his coach, and also he doesn't have his best weapon. Tetairoa McMillan was a first-round draft pick this year. So if you're Noah Fifita, your insurance policy is gone. I think that's where a lot of people are coming up short on expectations for Fifita. Also, he's not exactly a prototypical big-body quarterback. Now, I'm not critical of guys like this because they've had a lot of success in college football, and you're hoping the same thing for a Utah guy. Devin Dampier's 5'10", under like 200-ish pounds. That's what Noah Fifita's built like, but anyway. That's the expectation set for Sports Illustrated, and I put a poll question out at Real OC Sports, 877-353-0700. You can always get a hold of us on our text line as well. The over-under total has been set. Circa, the largest sports book in the world, at least that's what they like to call themselves, has the win totals out for the upcoming college football season. And Circa has Utah over-under set at 7.5 wins. So my question is, you have to bet the house. You're betting the farm. Most of you don't have a farm, but if you do, you're betting the farm on the over or on the under for Utah's 2025 football season. The win total set at 7.5 victories. Are you taking the over or are you taking the under? And before we get Alema on with us, I just want to refresh your memory on what that schedule looks like. You open with UCLA, and then it's Cal Poly, Wyoming on the road, which is a non-conference game I could not possibly hate more. You open your conference slate with Texas Tech, a team that a lot of people think is going to be the most improved team in the Big 12 Conference. A lot of people have tabbed Texas Tech as a top 3, top 5, in some publications even top 1 offseason when it comes to transfer portal additions. That's who you open your conference slate with. Then you're on the road, a long trip to West Virginia, who, according to Sports Illustrated, should just cancel the program this year.
Building for next year.
Arizona State, and this is a tough stretch. Arizona State, then BYU on the road, and then Colorado at home, Cincinnati on the road at Baylor, hosting Kansas State, on the road at Kansas. So you miss out on TCU, which might be a tough opponent this year. You miss out on a regular season matchup against Iowa State, who could potentially be a tough team this year. And you get BYU on the road, Arizona State at home, and Kansas State, I think, is a tough team. You get them at home. So it's not the nastiest gauntlet of a schedule we've seen Utah have to go through as a program. Obviously, some of those Pac-12 years where you had kind of back-to-back-to-back tough contests, you were, I think, a little bit more firmly established along your defensive front. You probably had equal or bigger questions on offense, but you're incorporating a new offense to this schedule. So you got to bet your considerable wealth on the over or the under at 7.5 for the University of Utah against that schedule. James Peterson, you taking the over, you taking the under?
Yes, my considerable wealth. 7.5 is the over-under. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say over. I think they get to at least 8 this year. I will. If you put a gun to my head to say how many wins they get in this year, I probably would predict 9.
My initial reaction, and again, this is a reflection of where Utah football has been in its status among power conference football peers the last several years. When I saw 7.5 as the win total set, I was like, oh, what? Come on, guys. 7.5? even in a really rough injury year 2 seasons ago, you hit 7.5. Like Bryson Barnes got you to 7. You hit the over on 7.5. Come on, guys. There's a reflection among the circa opinion, at least, that there's nobody, according to this sports book, and Vegas is right more often than they're wrong. That's why those casinos are so damn big, right? The highest win total they have set this year, what would you think it is for any Big 12 team?
9.5?
8.5.
Really?
Arizona State and Kansas State and Texas Tech are all sitting at 8.5.
Hammer the over on one of the one or all of those. Like, come on,
whoever you
now.
think is going to be the conference champion, you just have to hit the over here.
Yeah,
you're not going to win a conference championship with 8 wins.
There's always going to be a team with double-digit wins in the Power 5. You could say probably in every FBS conference there's a team with double-digit wins. It feels like it's
regular season. This doesn't include your bowl game. These are regular season win totals. So Arizona State 8.5, Kansas State 8.5, Texas Tech 8.5. And then you've got this thick through the middle problem that we experienced in the Pac-12. Baylor 7.5, BYU 7.5, Iowa State 7.5, Kansas 7.5, Utah 7.5, Houston, TCU, Cincinnati. Houston, TCU 6.5, Cincinnati 6, Colorado 6, Arizona, UCF 5.5, Oklahoma State and West Virginia 5. Oklahoma State, by the way, my reaction to Utah being predicted as a 7.5 win, like that's the line we're going to put you at. Feeling a little insulted by that. Can you imagine how distraught folks in Stillwater are right now? I mean, with Texas and Oklahoma still as a member of your conference, Oklahoma State was always in the conversation. It was always Oklahoma State, Kansas State that were not talked about enough. And every year people would say, Texas is back, baby. And they weren't. And it would be Kansas State or Oklahoma that was winning that conference. You would spatter in Baylor every once in a while when they had like a Heisman Trophy quarterback or something like that. But Oklahoma State has been a constant. There's more similarities than there are differences between Oklahoma State's status in the Big 12 and what Utah grew into in the Pac-12. And now Oklahoma State is being looked at as a little brother for everyone to step on. I cannot imagine the angst right now in Stillwater. You're betting the house, you're betting the farm, you're betting the car. You got to give up your dog. Your cat's going to go live with whoever beats you in this bet. Over under 7.5 wins for the University of Utah. Against the schedule that we just talked about, the schedule that we looked at, it by itself in a vacuum, no context on the new offense coming in, no context on really having 2 head coaches on the roster, right, with Kyle Whittingham and his heir apparent, Morgan Scalley, both helping to guide this ship. Even if you take all of that out, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, yes, absolutely over. This has to be an 8+ win year. You throw the context back in, and maybe you have a couple of worries, but I think that the worries are silenced by the confidences of knowing, like, what Morgan Scalley is coordinating a defense that brings back a lot of important players and added some decent talent and hopefully bolsters itself on the D-line with names that we don't yet know, but we should have come to trust at this point what the staff is able to do with that position group in particular. And then if you take into account the fact that Devin Dampier and New Mexico and Jason Beck combined for a top 5 offense in all of college football last year, when they didn't have nearly this good of an offensive line, they didn't have nearly this good of a defense supporting their efforts. It was just like a pull yourself up by the bootstraps and try to make something happen kind of an effort from Jason Beck and Devin Dampier. and they put up big numbers. Now, it didn't translate to a conference championship or anything like that because of the fact that there were massive deficiencies elsewhere. But you look at it and you say, all right, there's probably more room for optimism than 7.5 wins. And I fully acknowledge that I personally, not just because I'm a host on the Home of the Utes, but I personally, as an alum of the university, someone who feels like they know the coaching staff so well, I'm like, I wear red glasses every now and again, but 7.5, this is not a 9.5 total we're talking about. This is not like there's no room for error here. 7.5. This means you can lose 4 games in a schedule that really only has 3 that I'm looking at and be like, oh, that's going to suck.
We did say this similar thing about their schedule last year, though, to be fair. And you never really know till you get into the season.
And you're absolutely right. And I waffle back and forth on realizing that, but also being confident in the fact that Utah's season last year was a disaster because of injuries.
Yeah, it wasn't because – I mean, there were certainly teams like Arizona State and BYU that outperformed their preseason expectations by a lot. Yes. That were on your schedule last year, and that played a factor too.
You also
but the injuries were the main thing.
You were a penalty flag away from beating Arizona State. There was a crack block.
Oh, yeah, and Utah. and BYU. Excuse me.
I'll leave that one alone. But, like, on the road, Arizona State, with Cam Rising injuring himself again on the 3rd play of the game or the 2nd play of the game, unable to throw the football. Like, it was as big of a farce and ugly, like, bad luck situation as it possibly could have been. And you were an illegal block away from winning that game.
Yeah.
So imagine if Cam Rising doesn't get rolled up on the 2nd play of that. And I know you're not supposed to do this revisionist history thing. But when we're talking about setting expectations for 2025, and we're taking into account what 2023 and 2024 were from an injury standpoint, you can easily start to doubt this team, this staff, this program if you just look at the results on paper and you remove the context of, like, how many teams in the country are winning. Again, the total is set at 7.5. How many teams in the country are winning 8 games if they had to play 4 quarterbacks or more in back-to-back seasons? Utah won 8 games doing that 2 years ago, and last year they were a couple plays away from at least having a 7-win season. I'm not apologizing for it. It was an awful year. It was a bad year, but it was a bad year more because of injuries than because of anything else. Could things have been handled better from a communication standpoint, from a clarity and transparency standpoint, from a team chemistry standpoint related to those things? Obviously, yes. Could the Andy Ludwig situation have worked out a little bit better? Of course. I'm not making apologies for last year. I'm lighting it on fire and I'm throwing it in the trash, but I'm not pretending the reasons behind the underperformance last year didn't exist. If Utah ends up with significant injury to 8 of its best players for extended periods of 2025, then I will take the under. If it's a normal year where maybe you lose 1, 2, or 3 important starters for an extended period of time, like everyone else in the country probably experiences, then I'm hammering the over. Go Utes. All right. All poly camps. All poly camps are happening in Sandy. Full padded, full contact. Bring your own equipment, helmet, shoulder pads, knee pads, chin strap, mouth guard, jersey, cleats. allpolysports.com. Lone Peak Park in Sandy. The Rising Stars, that's grades 6 through 8. That's coming June 17th. College prospects, grades 9 and up, June 18th. allpolysports.com. Every camp will tell you this. It's true of All Poly Sports and has been since this thing started. College coaches show up to this camp and they watch these prospects and they start to write things down on their big board, scholarship offers come out of camps like this one. All Poly Sports, Lone Peak Park in Sandy, grades 9 and up, June 18th, 6 through 8, June 17th. Bring your mouthpiece, bring your cleats, put on your big boy pants. This is full padded, full contact camp in Sandy at Lone Peak Park. Allpolysports.com to register. All right, a rare treat, at least on this show. Jason Kreis, Director of Operations and Special Projects at RSL, is going to join us on the other side. We'll talk about the Claret and Cobalt. Sean O'Connell Show, just getting started on a Wednesday, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Chance to cross, dug out. It's Gonsalves in the middle. Good control in tight space on the volley, blocked. It's Diego Luna now trying to turn. Luna! Oh, it's in! What a goal! You can't keep him off the score sheet! Luna, another moment of magic!
That sound comes from MLS Season Pass and Apple TV. Diego Luna, spectacular goal. That was a recent draw for RSL at FC Dallas. Diego Luna off to a great start, 11, 12 games in. Sean O'Connell Show here on ESPN 700, and Jason Kreis, RSL Director of Operations and Special Projects, joins us again. Tickets are available for their game tonight at America First Field, RSL.com. Jason, welcome back to the show. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing all right. Let's talk about this matchup. Portland, obviously, they're off to a slightly better start on their season. They're, I think, third right now in the Western Conference standings. What's going to be the key for RSL to get some points here?
Well, very, very dangerous team. It's a team that sits in a mid-block defensively, which means they wait a little bit. They're not going to come out and high-press us as we begin our attacks. They're going to sit in a little bit more of a mid-block, be patient, and then they're an excellent counter-attacking team. They've got some really, really good weapons in their attacking midfield positions, in their striker and their wingers. So lots of speed to deal with tonight.
When you're dealing with a team that has that speed and that counterattack, and you've had some defensive struggles or some struggles keeping the goal out of your own net, what's the key in I guess, creating matchups or making maximizing the potential of your defensive posture?
Yeah, it's really clear. It's two things that you've got to do. Number one, you've got to be very responsible with the ball. So we can't be taking cheap risks in dangerous areas, especially in the mid-third of the field, in middle areas. So if we're going to lose the ball, we need to lose it deep in their end or in wide positions. And then obviously it's about stopping the counterattacks before they start. So how many players on our team defensively are thinking about the what if scenarios? If we lose those balls in dangerous positions, are they in a good enough spot to stop things before they start, either by winning tackles or making fouls?
As someone who is a moderate soccer watcher at best, like, give me a more detailed look at what it means to, like, not take are we talking shorter passes, fewer touches when the ball does come to you? Is it more touches when the ball comes to you? Like, to really, like, educate me on what it looks like, because obviously, I understand what you're saying, like, don't take the risks.
Right.
What does it actually look like to not take those risks?
You a football fan?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so think about what is a risky play and what is not a risky play in football, right? So it would be like long passes upfield in central areas. If we're going to make a mistake, we'll prefer to make it wide, just like they do in football. If they make a pass that's wide and they miss it, oftentimes it'll go out of bounds, or is the safer play to run the ball. And so for us, safer plays, like you did allude to one that's correct. Shorter passes, just being secure. So oftentimes when a player is on the ball, they typically will have three options. And it's about taking the safest option, not about trying to create a goal-scoring chance or to be very incisive with every single pass. It's just about being secure.
And then I guess probably a tough question also, where do you find the balance in, everyone on your squad knows this going in, but also you don't want people playing tight to not being themselves and not taking advantage of opportunities that do present themselves. How do you find that balance in a match like this one?
It's all about position, the same as it is in any other sport. Again, if we go back to football, I mean, they typically will take a lot more risks as they get closer to the end zone. And so for soccer, it's the same deal. In our back third or in our middle third, can we be more secure, not take as much risk? But when we get to the final third, now it's time for the creative players to take risks, to be brave, to create goal-scoring chances.
Jason Kreis, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking RSL. They've got Portland tonight at America First Field, and we played a Diego Luna highlight coming into the segment. He's off to a stellar start, and I know that you guys are incredibly high on not only his potential but what you're seeing from him right now. How do you make sure that this version continues and that you can capitalize on some of this momentum, maybe spread it around and allow other guys to play off it?
Yeah, I mean, it's two things. We got to continue to feed his confidence, to allow him to express himself. We have to allow him to know that he is an important player for us, a central figure. I don't think we're having a problem with that. The other side of it is to keep him grounded a little bit. He's still only 20 years old, got a lot in front of him, and got a lot of learning to do. So he's a hungry kid, and he wants to move up levels. So I don't have any doubts about either of those.
As far as the other guys playing off him the right way, when you are the 20-year-old, you're the wunderkind, you're the guy who's like, having a bit of a breakout, and you're surrounded by other young players, but also some veterans that are a little bit more seasoned and have been through maybe some of the peaks and valleys already in their careers. How does the team, how do the players on the field around him, not just coaches, not just front office, allow or help him and shape him in the right direction?
Well, I think it is. It is about the veteran players, a couple of veteran players. We do have a very young team, but we have a couple of older players in Diogo Gonçalves and Johnny Russell now, who we've added, and it's important that they spend time with him and talk to him and help to keep his feet on the ground. But I would actually turn it the other way and tell you that I think it's some of those older players and some of the other players in the attacking half of the field that need to step up. At the moment, I would say that Diego Luna is the only one that is performing to his capabilities or slightly above his capabilities. And in order to be a winning team, we're going to need more than just Diego Luna to do that.
That's an interesting idea. When you're the more seasoned professional, but you have to maybe look to the example of somebody who's early on and, like you said, performing above expectations. Does it change the locker room dynamic? I don't know what the personalities are like. I don't know if Diego's a guy who's like comfortable calling other people out or being vocal, or whether he likes to be deferential towards the older players. I mean, that in certain sports there's like that pecking order in the locker room.
Yeah.
How does it work for RSL right now?
Typically, it's a position that you have to earn, right? It's that respect that you have to earn, and I think he's doing a good job of earning that respect from everybody. So when he speaks up and demands things of others, I think that there are people that are now willing and ready to listen to him. But as I said, we need others to step up. That's the message I think that needs to be conveyed, is that there's 2-3 other players on our team that it's time to step up. And if they don't do so, then we won't be as successful this year.
So right now in the greater landscape of sports in the state of Utah, we have some interesting things going on. I'm sure you saw the Utah Jazz they got bad luck in the draft lottery. The Utah Mammoth, they got good luck in the draft lottery. And the conversations, at least here on this show, have been kind of about how you handle both situations, how you handle talent evaluation, talent acquisition through the draft. I know that there are multiple mechanisms in Major League Soccer and in the sport of soccer in general for, getting different players, better players onto your team. But when these opportunities come up, whether you got the better draft pick or the worst draft pick, you got to make sure you hit on those things. The Jazz have to do it. The hockey club, the Mammoth have to do it. How hard is it, Jason? I mean, you've been part of soccer at every level now, and just walk me through the evaluation process and the identifying someone that can help you, might be a fit. We love his skill, but I don't know if the personality is going to work here. How complicated is it?
Yeah, so let me start and probably end with the same statement. You're exactly right. It is not easy. It is very much not easy. In soccer, we don't rely on the draft as much as they do in the other American sports. In the other American sports, you will oftentimes find big stars in the draft. For soccer, that's not where we find our best players. They're just not there. You have to be, it's like a 1 in 100,000 that you're going to find somebody that's going to turn into a Diego Luna for you out of the college draft. Although, having said that, we did get a McNally from the draft, who's another really, really good player for Real Salt Lake this year and was last year. But for us, we find our players internationally typically or through trades with other teams. And now you just got to do a tremendous amount of homework. And I think there's some homework there that we honestly need to improve on. And it's just a lot of work. You've got to have the resources and the man hours to put in to watch these players play in many different environments to get an understanding about how they behave technically and tactically when they're under pressure. And so we've got to watch them in multiple games. We've got to talk to people that have worked with them before. We've got to talk to people that have been teammates with them before to understand about their character, because that is critically important for Real Salt Lake. And then we've got to interview the player. We've got to sit down and we've got to ask them tough questions and see whether or not the answers fit into our identity. So a lot of work that goes into it, and it's never going to be a 100% ball game that you're in. You know you're going to make mistakes, but I do think it's an area that Real Salt Lake needs to improve on, and I think we need to improve on it because that's one of the ways that we're going to be successful. We're going to have to be very, very good, smart, agile recruiters.
Tape doesn't lie in any sport, and I'm sure that's also the case in soccer, but because of that process you just described for me, I imagine that the level of competition and who you're watching these guys play against and whether they're excelling or maybe they're having some struggles, feels like there could be a pretty broad spectrum of competition on this international slate. And we know this is the case with some of the international guys in NBA basketball. With football, the football draft, the NBA draft, most of the time you kind of know, like, okay, we've seen this guy. He's been playing at Duke. We know what the competition is like in the NCAA tournament. We know what it's like in Power 4, Power 5 NCAA basketball. So I think it's maybe a little bit easier than it sounds like it would be in soccer. So how much of that calculus is involved in the evaluation process?
Yeah, you've actually just brought up another really difficult variable that you have to account for. Exactly. You know, what league are they playing in, and how does that relate to MLS? MLS is a very different league. MLS is a very physical, very transitional league. So, for instance, if you were to scout a player that plays in Spain, where it's a very controlled, methodical, tactical league, you could have some real difficulties because a player that stands out there and is an excellent player there may not translate to be an excellent MLS player. So, good point. Another big variable that we have to consider.
Big picture with the level of soccer being played in MLS right now. Obviously in Europe that's still like the gold standard, but MLS has been climbing the perception ladder for years and years and years. Where is it at right now? Where's MLS, especially the top teams in MLS right now, the top players in MLS right now on the world stage of soccer? Because it is a different brand, like you said.
It is, and it has come leaps and bounds, I'll tell you what. I mean, my last game as an MLS professional player was in 2007, and I'm fairly convinced that if I was playing in this league, I wouldn't play much. So the level is vastly different. The level is vastly improved. I do believe that we are easily a top 10 league in the world right now, and I think we're headed in a much more positive direction than that. So I'm bold on this. I think that MLS is going to be a top league in the world. It's going to take some more time. It's going to take some more resources. It's going to take some steady growth, slow growth.
Is it hard to have that realization? I can ask you this question because I look at the MMA world where I had a little bit of success and I see the same thing. I'm just like, man, it wasn't that long ago. My last fight was 7 years ago. I'm like, it wasn't that long ago. And you're fighting guys that are built like me now at the top level. They're all dudes that should be in the NFL. They're just coming out of different countries where the NFL didn't exist, you know? So as you're looking at soccer now and you're like, I don't know how good I would be in this league. Is that damaging to the ego, or are you just celebrating the growth of the league?
Well, I just think it's a question of what your ego's like, right? So, I mean, your ego wants to tell you, no, that's not the case. I'd still score 108 goals in this league. But when you start to watch it and think about just the physicality of it, and that was probably the area that I lacked the most in, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. So I guess there's the perception versus reality, right? The perception in my ego wants to tell me I could do it, but probably the reality is that's not the case.
Yeah. I know how you feel. So me and you we can start a club for guys like us.
A pity party, right?
Perfect. Jason, enjoy the game. Good luck against Portland tonight. Always appreciate your insight and your time. Thank you, sir.
You bet, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Jason Kreis, RSL Director of Operations and Special Projects. RSL versus Portland tonight, America First Field, rsl.com for tickets. Go get them right now. We've got 18 holes to Talon's Cove we're going to give away later today. That'll be during Topical Trivia, Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association, Mountain America Credit Union. I mean, we're giving you golf every day, all day here on your home of the Utes. Down and Dirty with Scott Mitchell, he gave some away. We're going to give some away today. Spence Checketts is also going to do the same. So make sure you're listening when we give away golf, courtesy of Mountain America Credit Union and the Utah Golf Association. All right. Major League Baseball made a huge decision, and they said Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, a lot of guys are now eligible for induction into the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame. I put a poll question out last night as soon as I saw this. Does Pete Rose end up in the Hall? We'll discuss next on the Sean O'Connell Show. Utah's number one sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Make sure you go to the old tweet machine, or x.com if you're young and cool enough to call it that, and vote on all the Twitter polls I put out today. At Real OC Sports is how you find me. Utah Hockey Club gear is now available at NHL Shop. You get one piece of merch. Which logo are you going with? The Mammoth Head, the Tusk U, or the state of Utah outline with the hockey stick in it? That's one question. Over-unders on Utah and BYU's win totals. Both of those set at 7.5. You're taking the over or the under if you got to bet the house, bet the farm, bet all of your net worth. And I asked the question last night regarding this little piece of news, this little tidbit, that Major League Baseball has decided to lift the sanction, remove the ban on Pete Rose.
Just a little tidbit. Not a big deal at all.
Pete Rose is now eligible for induction to the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. How do you feel about it? Finally, put him in. Should still be kept out, or too little too late because it's a posthumous thing. I have a little bit of an issue with this, and that's part of their justification, by the way, that somebody who is no longer with us can not represent an existential threat to baseball. So now we're going to remove the ban. He's gone. He's dead. He's buried. So now we're going to remove the ban. It feels macabre. It feels a little gruesome to me. Like,
on the fact that they waited over 100. Well, I don't know how long Shoeless Joe Jackson's been. How long it's been since he passed, but it hasn't been 100 years. But 100 years since he was banned. To make that clarification on Shoeless Joe Jackson.
1951.
Okay, so
74 years ago.
3 quarter centuries ago. That to say, okay, Pete Rose gets this because he's no longer an existential threat to baseball because he's passed away now. But Shoeless Joe Jackson, we took 75 years to come to that conclusion. It's weird.
Let's see. Arnold Chick Grandel, Oscar Happy Felsch, Fred McMullen, Charles Swade Risberg, George Buck Weaver, Claude Lefty Williams. Man, people were really dedicated to the nickname back then.
Old-time baseball nicknames are fantastic.
Shoeless Joe Jackson, those were his teammates, part of the 1919 Chicago Black Sox scandal where they were taking bribes from gambling concerns to intentionally lose the World Series that year. That led to the first appointment of a baseball commissioner. Did you know that? Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Another fantastic name.
What a name. What's your name? My name is Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
I didn't know that was the precursor to the first commissioner.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, what's it called? 8 Man Out, the movie about it with John Cusack. Really good movie, by the way, about this story. But yeah, I fall into no, I don't think that Pete Rose in particular should be elected to the Hall of Fame. The guy made his bed. He should lie in it now that even though his legacy should lie in that bed that he's made. He was never contrite about it. He was very much, well, put me in anyway. Like, you had plenty of time to show that contrition, to make your case better than you did when you were alive, Pete Rose. Just because you passed and we're all saying, well, gambling's embedded, baseball's embedded in gambling now. It's a completely different thing when you're talking about fans being able to bet on baseball and people who work for baseball teams betting on baseball that your team's involved in. That's what Pete Rose did. Sorry, he should not be a Hall of Famer.
He bet as a player and a manager on the Reds. Now, he maintained he never bet against the Reds, and he bet on his teams to win. There's no way to corroborate or to verify whether that was true or not. Also, in 2015, same commissioner, right? Manfred said, there's no evidence that you truly believe remorse, that you've reformed away from this gambling style. So, no, we're not going to let you in. And now He's been reinstated. 2028 would be the first year that you could actually put him in. Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, a bunch of guys with cool nicknames like Albert Cozy Dolan and Jimmy O'Connell. I got to look up and see if we're related.
JOC.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen, with Shoeless Joe Jackson, I feel like it's a whole other thing. He was one that there's at least lots of reporting, lots of anecdotal stories that said that his teammates took that money. Shoeless Joe did not. He was guilty by association.
Yeah, there's a lot of contention there.
Yeah.
And it's just, we have, like, the opinions of that have kind of softened because
it
was 95 years ago.
Yeah, I also feel like Field of Dreams has done a lot for Shoeless Joe Jackson, and people being, why isn't that guy in the Hall of Fame? He's Ray Liotta was awesome playing him in Field of Dreams.
Raise your hand if you've been to the actual Field of Dreams in Dyersville, Iowa. Oh, James, you haven't?
How's bragging camp going, OC?
Oh, it's too bad you haven't been there. It's too bad that your parents aren't from Iowa, and so you didn't go back there as a kid.
Did you say the line, "Is this heaven"?
No, because I think I was like 8 when I went.
Did your?
But I've run the bases at the Field of Dreams. They actually.
Did you see people coming? Because it says people will come.
Yeah, I didn't build it though.
Oh.
So they didn't. They weren't going to show up because I was there. No, it's actually a huge like sports complex now where they run like a lot of Little League baseball tournaments and things like that. There was a time in the history of the Field of Dreams sat on an actual farm in an actual cornfield in Dyersville, Iowa, where the farmer was like, yeah, I need to, like a baseball field covers, I don't know, a couple acres. He's like, I'm going to grow corn here, guys, because that's what I do. I can't afford to just have this like piece of my land that isn't producing for me.
And it was the opposite thing, but it had the same reaction. What are you doing? Same reaction.
Exactly. Like, no, you can't unbuild this thing.
We'll stop coming.
Yeah, so they figured it out. Anyway, Field of Dreams.
And they've had some really cool MLB games at the Field of Dreams games too in recent years. So it's pretty cool. Yeah.
But I should have just said yes, put him in, but too little, too late, I think mattered. 26% of people say it's too little, too late. 68% of people say put him in. Only 6% of people think that he should be kept out of the Hall of Fame that are responding to this poll. So anyway, thanks for your participation. 877-353-0700. Anytime you want to weigh in on the text line, that's always available to you. We're going to take a quick one here. Adam Rittenberg and ESPN put out a really interesting piece ranking the offseason for every Power 4 team in college football. Where does Utah sit according to the ESPN evaluation? We'll find out with Adam Rittenberg next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. The offseason in college football now is almost as important as the actual season because you've got to reorganize your roster. You got to hire the right coaches. It's been a big offseason for the University of Utah. ESPN has a really interesting piece out right now evaluating the off seasons of every Power 4 team in college football. Joining us to talk about it, ESPN College Football Insider lead writer Adam Rittenberg, friend of the program, back after it's been a while. Adam, how are you?
I'm good, OC. How you doing, man?
Doing all right. Great to have you on. Appreciate you writing great content that I can then use as material on my show. It makes my life a whole lot easier, so thank you.
I'm here for you, brother. That's the inspiration for writing 25,000 words in the middle of May.
Yes, I'm always front of mind for you when you're doing your job, I'm sure. All right, let's talk about how you and your colleagues have evaluated Utah's offseason, ranked as the 7th best offseason in the Big 12 Conference. And obviously the key additions, as you have it listed, broken down, Devin Dampier, starting quarterback, presumed starting quarterback, I should say, is number 1 there. Let's start with that. A guy who was really exciting at the Group of 5 level for a New Mexico team that it didn't necessarily translate to a bunch of huge wins for them, but a guy that I think has all the tools and the promise and the whatever that when we initially adopted the transfer portal as a thing, it was for this. It was for guys who were a little bit too good to be stuck in Albuquerque to go to a bigger school. Do you think it translates at the Big 12 level for Devin Dampier?
Yeah, I think it should, and I think it's an exciting time for a Utah program that, let's face it, has been kind of held hostage by injuries and other issues at quarterback the last 2 seasons. That's the primary reason why Utah hasn't reached the expectations that were placed on it moving into the Big 12 here, at least last year, and even in this last year in the Pac-12. So I think this is a good thing. And, there's been a lot of talk nationally about the Ben Arbuckle, John Mateer pairing, coordinator and quarterback at Oklahoma. I think there's less discussion, at least nationally, about Jason Beck and Devin Dampier, but I think there will be more when the season rolls around, because I think this is a really good move for Utah to address its major issue there at quarterback and create a vision and an outlook that you can really build the rest of your team around. Because as you know, and your listeners know, defense and special teams usually aren't the problem in Salt Lake. A coordinator and the offense has been a little bit more of a revolving door under Kyle Whittingham, and I think this gives Utah, again, a very clear path going forward. And now they have to obviously step up around him. But I think there's certainly some excitement brewing for this year's team.
One of the things that, and you referenced the revolving door of offensive coordinators, that the thing that interrupted that, it was with 7 coordinators in 7 years at one point. The thing that interrupted that was the return of Andy Ludwig, and a guy that was, in my opinion, he was the Batman to Kyle Whittingham's Robin. There was enough respect between them that Kyle Whittingham was like, all right, I trust that you're going to run the offense the right way. And I think he gave a little bit more leash, or at least that there was more cohesive thought on what the offense should be. And we saw Andy Ludwig, spread things out a little bit. And even when they didn't have great wide receiving cores, you got the tight ends involved and all that. But every Utah fan knows and fears that there's this idea of, with Kyle Whittingham, shorten the game, run the ball, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And now you've got a new offensive coordinator. You've got a new quarterback. How imperative in your mind is it that it doesn't go back to the old ways, to the conservative approach that has been so heavily criticized for Utah football in recent years and in past years?
Yeah, I think it's critically important that Kyle lets Jason and Devin be themselves and feed into ultimately what his strengths are as a quarterback. And you saw that with a healthy Cam Rising and the things that he was able to do out there when Utah was winning the Pac-12, being effective as a runner, playing fearlessly at times. I think that's what you want if you're a Utah fan out of this particular quarterback because of his skill set. So that's a really important point, OC. I think it's something that we're going to watch early in the year, is how much freedom are they truly getting or giving to Jason Beck And then ultimately for him, I think, if he gets that freedom, we know Devin Dampier is going to have it because we saw what they were able to do just last season at New Mexico. And, obviously Jason's coming from, Syracuse, and, he's obviously been at BYU. He has a really nice palette of experience to bring there to Utah. But, I think, again, if Kyle's done this a long time, and I know those criticisms of him are valid, but I think he recognizes for them to take a step forward this season, being overly restrictive as with the quarterback and the overall philosophy on offense probably isn't the right path to having greater success.
Can you have a great offense if you don't have a great wide receiving core in modern college football?
Yeah, it's a great question, and again, that's a group that I think a lot of us are going to be watching with some question marks with Utah in particular. Is how much can a guy like Devin Dampier and a system like Jason Beck has improve a group that isn't as decorated as some of the other groups that are returning in the Big 12. And I know they obviously made some additions in the portal, but was it enough? And they've obviously lost a number of players as well on their offense just because of graduation and some transferring out. So it's definitely a group to watch. But I think if given the choice of strong wide receiving group or a potentially elite quarterback, I think you're going to take the quarterback every single time because of what he can do to impact those around him. And that's going to be a key storyline here leading up to the season and certainly through the first few weeks of games.
The story that you helped write references this, but a lot of love, a lot of conversation, a lot of buzz now about Utah's offensive line, and in particular their bookend tackles. Caleb Lomu on the left side and Spencer Fano on the right side. Both of those guys in a lot of the way too early draft predictions are getting even as high as first-round grades for two of them. Now, I've been paying close attention to Utah football for several decades now. I'm quite certain there's never been two first-round offensive tackles on the same Utah roster. If they end up playing at that level, what does that look like for Utah in your mind?
Well, it just allows so many other things to happen. Whether it's just Dampier being able to make plays, a guy like Wayshawn Parker coming in as an exciting running back, some of the receivers that we were talking about a little bit, being able to have more time to get open against defenses. And so, for Utah, they've been a program, as that's been built around the line of scrimmage for many years. Maybe a little bit more decorated on the defensive lines at times than the offensive line, but this particular offensive line, I think there's reason to be very, very excited. And I think that if you have that in place, it's almost like everything else will kind of find its way. It's very, very hard to build a team the other way where you have the quarterback, you have the receivers, you have the running back, and you have major questions on the offensive line. That's just something that's very, very difficult to overcome. Whereas Utah can go into the year, sure, with some questions at receiver, a little bit at running back with some new personnel, quarterback to a degree. But when you have that foundation of the offensive line, especially the ends of the offensive line, you can feel pretty good about your ability to protect and give your quarterback a chance to do some of the things that he did at New Mexico.
Adam Rentberg, ESPN, is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking college football. Very fascinating article on ESPN.com about the offseason rankings for every Power 4 college football team. Adam and his colleagues did a great job breaking it down team by team. Utah's offseason ranked 7th in the Big 12. BYU, who everyone here plays close attention to, much to their own chagrin sometimes. You've got them ranked 9th as an offseason squad. And look, they had a great year last year, and there's high hopes, and that name is appearing on a lot of preseason top 25s. What do you think of BYU's upcoming season from a win perspective, and obviously through the lens of this article that you just helped write?
Right. Yeah, I think this is a team that certainly should feel excited coming off of last season, and the way they finished it with their dominant bowl win over Colorado, getting to the Big 12 or nearly getting to the Big 12 championship game, but being right there, with Arizona State. Now, again, there's a lot of players that have departed the program, and either through graduation and moving on, or to the portal. And so it's going to be a new team, and that's just the case in college football these days, is that very rarely are you going to have close to a carbon copy of the group that you had walking off of the field in December or January. And so it's about bringing that group together. And it's, like we talked with Utah having a new quarterback, obviously Jake Retzloff coming back to Provo after the season that he had, with a handful of starters around him. And I know they added the Bachmeyers late in the portal, and see if they can kind of help from a depth standpoint and playmaking standpoint. But, again, it's going to be a new look team in some ways with some really familiar faces, obviously, at quarterback. And I think again, one part of this, OC, that I really focused on was the coaching staffs. Part of the offseason is, in Utah's case, it's bringing in Jason Beck to replace Andy Ludwig, who generally did a great job there. In BYU's case, they were able to retain both of their top coordinators who've done really good jobs in my view. Jay Hill on defense and A-Rod obviously on offense. Jay was a guy that I thought was going to get the Utah State job. It didn't happen. Obviously, Bronco ended up getting that one. And Jay's back, and I think that's a really good thing for BYU. Obviously, A-Rod has done this for a long time with different quarterbacks. I actually got to see him out here in Chicago earlier this spring. It was great to catch up with him. I know he's excited about some of the personnel that are coming back and others that are emerging on that offense. So, just because they're ninth in off-season rankings doesn't mean they're going to be ninth in Big 12 preseason poll, or I think that they're absolutely a team that should be on everyone's list as a contender to win the conference championship.
So you and I did a bunch of shows together on Sirius XM, and I know several times we talked about, man, what if Arizona State can just get it figured out, man? That's a sleeping giant of a program. Everyone who's paid any attention to Arizona State or has been on that campus and knows now what the local high schools are producing, for that matter, we've been kind of waiting for, I guess, last year to happen. Is it going to be sustainable for Kenny Dillingham in the Valley of the Sun? Is this the awakening that we long waited for, and now I guess maybe should have feared, of Arizona State football?
One of the things I think we talked about, and I know that I've thought about this if we didn't talk about it on our shows, OC, is the fact that Arizona State went so long without a coach who really had roots in that area. And they typically went for, the older, established, experienced coaches. Nothing wrong with that. But I really thought that they needed somebody who had a stronger connection to the university and ideally to the Valley. And clearly Kenny Dillingham is that guy. And yes, he's a young guy, and everyone talks about his age, but if you really look at his experience level, he was someone who essentially began coaching as soon as he got to college, even when he was still in high school a little bit. So he has coached football for a long time. And that's why I call him a young old guy. And I think he really understands different, kind of how to win at Arizona State, but also has a national view of the sport, having coached at places like Florida State and Auburn and Memphis and Oregon. He really understands what's going on around the landscape of college football. And I think that served him well as a young head coach, but one who has matured very quickly and obviously won a conference title in year two. And I think the way that he handles the portal is refreshing. You get a lot of hand-wringing and complaints about the portal. Kenny just kind of rolls with it. And, you look at their offseason, they certainly lost some people, just like everyone does in the portal, but they were able to add and they were able to keep. They keep Sam Levitt, they keep Jordan Tyson, and some of their other key players from last year. They were also able to retain their primary coordinators, and Marcus Arroyo, who is a former FBS head coach at UNLV and was on the list for some jobs. He's back. He was a Broyles Award finalist. Brian Ward has done a really nice job on defense. He's back. They really didn't lose a whole lot from the coaching staff, and that's why they'll be a popular pick to repeat. I don't know if it's going to happen. The Big 12 is really unpredictable, but they have set themselves up for future success, and I really think a big part of that is having a coach who's really devoted to the university and to the area, unlike his predecessors. Nothing against guys like even Herm or Todd Graham, or going back to Dennis Erickson and Dirk Cutter and some of those guys, but they just weren't connected to that area nearly the way that Kenny is.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I love seeing the success for him. I like him. I love seeing, my thoughts about Arizona State be validated, but now I'm like, oh, wait, this is a problem for everyone else in the Big 12 to try and get through, and that doesn't necessarily serve Utah here on the home of the Utes. Adam Rittenberg for another minute or two on the Sean O'Connell Show. More of a big picture thing going on right now, but the House settlement, there's been delays. You hear all these proposed potential changes. Is this thing going to be done, dusted, settled, and ink dry before the 2025 season at this point?
Well, I certainly hope so. I know there's a number of coaches that are anxious for a resolution. It's not surprising in a sense that things are dragging on, because that's just what happens in anything related to college athletics, that nothing comes together very, very quickly. But I do know, like, talking to coaches, especially at the lower levels, FCS and elsewhere, they want to figure out what their rosters are going to look like. And there's obviously a trickle-down effect to the numbers, to the portal, to the money, that just doesn't just impact the Utahs and BYUs of the world, but really some of the smaller schools as well. So, we're sitting here on May 14th. I know there was hope to get this thing done about 6 weeks ago. If we're sitting here on July 14th in the same position, I would certainly get a little bit worried. But let's hope that there is at least some type of clarity. That's what a lot of people around the sport that I talk to are looking for.
Is 2025 a year of increased parity in college football with maybe this House settlement, redistributing funds a little bit or leveling that, evening it out? Or is it, more of what we saw in college basketball and what we saw last year in college football, where ultimately it's, the top four payrolls that end up fighting for it all at the end?
Yeah, I think at the very top, it's going to be hard for a true Cinderella to get there, a team that isn't spending or winning at that level. But I think there is opportunity for parity. I mean, you look at the Big 12 race last year, was very, very compelling. There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams that finished either 7-2 or 6-3 in the league. I think that's very, very possible once again in the 2025 season. I think there could be more parity in the SEC. Alabama has kind of come down to earth. Georgia has some questions on offense. Texas is replacing its quarterback and lost a first-round receiver and has some question marks there. South Carolina returns Lenora Sellers, and there's a number of other quarterbacks that are coming back in the conference. So I think the SEC could have a little bit more parity. I think the Big Ten is still that league, and we saw it last year. I mean, the Big Ten was set up perfectly to make the playoff because you had 4 teams that had really separated themselves record-wise from the rest of the league in Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Indiana. I don't know if it'll be exactly that again, but I certainly think you look at teams like Penn State, Oregon, and Ohio State, it would be surprising if they're not in playoff position again. And then maybe there is a 4th team, whether it's Indiana again or Illinois is getting a lot of buzz, or maybe Iowa moves up, or USC or someone like that. Maybe that's a 4th team. But I do see kind of a clearer tiers in the Big Ten than maybe some of these other conferences. And then the ACC will be fascinating because Clemson has momentum now. They won the conference. They bring back, in my view, the best roster in the conference. But, Miami has talent. Mario's always going to add players, as you know. SMU brings back Kevin Jennings. I know he's taken a lot of hits since that playoff performance against Penn State. Still a really good player. I think Louisville's pretty good. So maybe we'll get a little parity in the SEC, in the ACC, but I don't think it'll be as vast as it will be really any league, at least from the Power 4 level of the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to be year in and year out the most exciting league race.
Have you ordered any Utah Mammoth NHL gear yet?
No, not yet, although my daughter is getting into hockey, which I hear is a very, very expensive thing to go down that road. But I'll have to see if she wants any Mammoths. The Blackhawks were rolling here right around the time I started having kids, and they weren't old enough to enjoy it. And then they've kind of gone in the tank for 7-8 years. So we may become Mammoth fans before you know it. Well,
let me know if you need me to pick you up some stuff from the pro shop. Last thing before I let you go, it's not a college football question. Pete Rose, eligible now for the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. Is he going to get in?
I think he will. And, baseball is just such a funny sport, OC, because of all the retroactive stuff that seems to happen and how even the greatest players have to wait before they get into the Hall of Fame, even if they don't have any baggage. And it's unfortunate. I mean, I don't see the point of waiting until somebody dies before you are going to honor them. And if they were a great player, they were a great player. I mean, I get the other side of the argument. I respect the that viewpoint, but it's just odd how they tend to handle these. I mean, are we going to see another Field of Dreams movie now that Shoeless Joe can get in from the Black Sox? So it's just very interesting how that sport handles its history.
It is very strange. I will co-sign that. Thank you so much for your time today. It's great catching up with you, and obviously, as the season approaches, we will be bothering you for more of these conversations. Thanks.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Adam Rittenberg, ESPN College Football Insider, co-author on this piece that we were just talking about, the off-season grades, ranking off-season teams in Power 4 football. Big 12 grades look like this. Number 1, Texas Tech. Number 2, Arizona State in the Big 12, according to Adam and his colleagues. The Baylor Bears came in at 3, Iowa State at 4, Kansas State at 5, TCU at 6, Utah at 7, Cincinnati at 8, BYU at 9, Colorado at 10, and down from there. By the way, that's not a preseason ranking. That's not where they expect these teams to end up in the Big 12 Conference. That is an evaluation of the moves made in the offseason. Speaking of off seasons, one of the most exciting off seasons we can imagine for the Utah Mammoth, formerly Utah Hockey Club. Brogan Houston's going to join us. We're going to talk about the team name. We're going to talk about the upcoming draft. We're going to talk about the NHL playoffs. Big thanks again to Adam Rittenberg for joining us for part of our Big 12 at noon coverage, brought to you by Mountain Land Supply. Brogan Houston in 3 minutes on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
come roaring down.
Mikael Granlund hat trick. Dallas Stars won 3-1. That's game 4 of a second-round series. That sound courtesy of ESPN and the iconic voice of Steve Levy on the call. Dallas Stars leading that series 3-1. Game 5 tomorrow night. We have every game of the conference finals and the Stanley Cup final here on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Your home of the Stanley Cup playoffs and unofficial home, very unofficial home of Utah Mammoth Celebration, because we are so pumped, at least on this show, about the new franchise name. Brogan Houston covers the Utah Mammoth, formerly known as the Utah Hockey Club for the Des News, member of the Professional Hockey Writers Association of America, and he joins us to talk all things hockey. Brogan, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me back once again, and I apologize in advance if I call it the Utah Hockey Club more than 3 or 4 times. It'll take me a while.
It's all right. There's a grace period. We're still in that grace period. You got like the whole summer to get all those out of your system. We're not going to judge you on that. As long as we're talking about the Utah Hockey Club, these guys have not yet worn a Mammoth jersey, but Clayton Keller and Logan Cooley and others are involved in, they're playing for Team USA right now. I honestly did not see the result against Norway. How'd that thing play out?
Oh, that one was a bit of a nail biter toward the end there. The U.S. got out to a pretty handsome lead, and then Norway came back and tied it up. A hat trick from Stian Solberg, who was drafted, I believe, by the Ducks last year. And so, big performance from him. They went to overtime, and then Clayton Keller actually drew a penalty in overtime, and Tage Thompson completes his hat trick in overtime with assists from Utah Mammoth, Clayton Keller, and Logan Cooley. So pretty roller coaster of a game, but the U.S. eventually pulled it off. It's not exactly what they need in a tournament like this, because overtime wins count for less than regulation wins, but they got the job done, and that's what matters in the group stage here.
Okay, and obviously, anytime you get a chance to wear the USA sweater, these guys take an opportunity to do it. Coming off the grind of a long NHL season, and I know that these guys are healthy enough, but what kind of value does this translate to for the Mammoth when, you've got these guys in their off season getting more time, getting more ice time, skating more shifts, playing with some different teammates and maybe adjusting to things like that? How can this translate, on the positive, or I guess if there is a negative side for the Mammoth?
Well, certainly with the experience in playing in really meaningful games like these, especially as you get later on in the tournament and you get into the single game elimination round robin stages, that's really valuable for players like Logan Cooley, Michael Kesselring, these young guys. Josh Stone is another one. These young guys that haven't necessarily had much NHL experience or much, big stage experience like that. They've got a couple of years, but they don't have playoff experience or anything like that. So it's really good. And that's something that Utah management really values highly. If you look at everybody they've brought in, since they made the move to Utah, everybody's won the Stanley Cup. Olli Maatta, Ian Cole, Kevin Stenlund, Mikhail Sergachev, like all these guys that they've acquired or signed, they're all Stanley Cup champions. If you look at pretty much everybody on the roster, almost everybody on Utah's roster has won in juniors or in college, or they've won their championship in some other league there. And that's a really big thing that this management team looks for, is that experience, that championship pedigree. And so if Team USA or the other teams in this tournament that have Utah players, if any of them can go far in this tournament, I think Bill Armstrong and his staff, they see that as a huge positive, and a really big step in their development. Because then the next time that they're in the playoffs, the next time they're in these meaningful games, these guys will say, hey, I've been there before. I've done this. I know that we shouldn't panic when we, relent against a team like Norway and we, all of a sudden find ourselves in overtime. I know we can't panic there because we came back in overtime that one game on this big stage in an international tournament. And so, when they get to that stage in Utah, in the playoffs, in meaningful games, they've been there before, they know how to do it. And, ideally they'll be able to do it again.
Talking a little Utah Hockey Club and the NHL. For them, off season, we'll get to some playoffs here in just a second on the Sean O'Connell Show. Brogan Houston is our guest. We've spent some time this week lamenting the bad draft lottery luck of the Utah Jazz, but if we go back, and we haven't had a conversation since then, to I guess like a week and a half ago, it was great luck for the Utah Hockey Club, moving from a possible number 14 pick all the way up to number 4 in this upcoming NHL draft, and that completely changes the player available to you. What do you think Utah does with this number 4 pick?
Yeah, you know what? I do think that they're still torn between keeping it and trading it. I've written articles on each side on what they could do with it. You can go check those out on deseretnews.com or deseret.com rather. I think that either way they can't lose. They could lose. There's ways that you could still mess that up, but they're either going to get a really good prospect or a really good player to help them now. And either way, the team will be better off for it. I do think that there are some gems that you could get either way. And I honestly don't really have an opinion. I think either way, they'll make a good decision and they'll get a guy that'll help them at some point.
All right, let's talk about these Stanley Cup playoffs right now. Second round series, we got a bunch of 3-1. It's just like the NBA playoffs. You got a bunch of 3-1 series or series that are already ending, and then you've got this Leafs Panthers series that is 2-2 and violence promised for the start of Game 5 tonight. You think that gloves are dropping like right at the face-off?
That's a good question. I don't know if it'll go that far. I don't think Ryan Reeves will be in the lineup for Toronto tonight, but I do think that there will be some tight checking, some good plays, like good high skill plays, that kind of stuff. It's always high intensity, even if there's not that fighting. I think it was the Leafs social media team the other day. They posted a video of the Panthers goal, and they're like, "Hey, I don't know if the Panthers were trying to score a goal or run our goalie, but they managed to do both." Excuse me. And I think that really shows how these playoffs are across all these series. Is they're not necessarily looking to put on a show and fight like the way that we saw at that Four Nations tournament earlier in the year. It's not necessarily that kind of thing. It's more of, hey, we're gonna beat you up on the scoreboard, and we're gonna try and take a piece of you as we go. So you saw Sam Bennett throw the elbow toward his former teammate Anthony Stolarz there on that one play. He's going for the puck, and then he accidentally, quote unquote, bumps him with the elbow in the head, and that's kind of the physicality type of stuff that we see in the playoffs. There's not often a lot of fights in the playoffs.
So, are you surprised by any of the somewhat lopsided results? I shouldn't get out ahead of myself because it's not like unprecedented for teams to come back from down 3-1, but only that one series we were just talking about is tied right now. So you've got Winnipeg on the brink of elimination. You've got Vegas on the brink of elimination. Same is true for the Capitals. Any of that surprising you at this moment?
You know what? It shouldn't be surprising, at least for the Carolina-Washington series and the Dallas-Winnipeg series. Because in both of those instances, the team that's up 3-1 is the team that has been to the third round of the playoffs nearly every year for the past, 5-10 years, whatever it is. Like it's those deep teams that, they keep contending year after year. They don't really have a ton of personnel swapping between them. And they're both going against teams that are kind of getting their feet wet for the first time in the playoffs here. So neither of those two should be that surprising. The one that does surprise me is the Edmonton-Vegas series. Vegas is only 2 years removed from their Stanley Cup championship. Of course, the Edmonton Oilers lost in Game 7 of the final last year, so they also have plenty of good experience. But I didn't think that one would be as lopsided. I thought, Vegas would stand much higher of a chance here. But, like you said, anything can change at the drop of a hat. Any team can win any game. So, don't count anybody out until that final buzzer sounds.
Which goaltender do you trust most right now in these playoffs?
Oh, out of everybody, I'm probably going with Jake Ottinger. He's just been solid, on fire. Full disclosure, I voted for Connor Hellebuck to win the Hart Trophy, and I had him as my first ballot on the first team All-Star. But in the playoffs, he just hasn't been the same goalie, and so I got to go with Jake Ottinger right now.
Brogan, it's always good getting your thoughts and catching up with you. Appreciate your time, and I don't think you called him Utah Hockey Club even once.
Oh, there we go. I'm learning.
Are you? Do you like the Mammoth branding? Have you? Do you enjoy the logos and everything, the sweater mock-ups? Well, I guess not mock-ups anymore. Now they're real. They're not available yet.
Yeah.
But do you like the way that it was executed?
Yeah, no, I'm a fan of all the branding kind of stuff. The more I see it on, like, say, hoodies or shirts, or when we went to the rink for that press conference and they had it on the on the outside of the arena on flags and on the scoreboard thing outside the arena there. Like, the more I saw it out there, I was like, wow, like, that's a clean logo. And I like all the Easter eggs in it and stuff. I also am a really big fan of not having to write Utah Hockey Club in articles anymore. It was just clunky, so. Utah Mammoth, it's just crisp, it's clean. And I know a lot of people hate that it's not plural Mammoth instead of Mammoth. I don't really have an opinion on it, though. I kind of like it. It's clean and it's a little bit original. So yeah, I'm a fan of that for sure.
Brogan, we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Sean.
Brogan Houston from the Des News, Utah Hockey Club insider, now a Utah Mammoth insider. You love it. You love the change. We still have Rafael Barlow joining us in about 15 minutes to talk NBA draft. In hour number 3, Jerem Jordan will stop by at 1:30. We'll talk about BYU's offseason and the addition of a new athletic director. They've hired Brian Santiago. I guess they've elevated Brian Santiago to replace Tom Holmoe. He's been part of that athletic department for quite some time now. So I hope you've been paying attention to this new partnership that we've established here at ESPN 700. Especially if you're a gentleman listening right now, maybe it's time to address a little bit of weight gain. Maybe you're worried about low hormone levels, the testosterone, the libido, all that stuff just hasn't felt the same. Maybe there's bald spots that you want to take care of. If it's just the overall health picture that you want to take a look at, we've got a place for you to go. It's called the Steel Vault. It's in the heart of Holiday, and they're a medical spa that can take care of all of these things. Maybe you just want to get rid of a couple of wrinkles, the crow's feet. If you've been tired lately, your sleep patterns are interrupted, you're not able to lift the way that you want to, your workouts are lacking, the bedroom stuff is not where it used to be. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be worried about it. Don't be embarrassed. Just go get it taken care of. You're 42, you want to feel 22 again? The Steel Vault can help you out with that. And they're offering 20% off their services for our ESPN 700 listeners. All you have to do is mention the Sean O'Connell Show or ESPN 700 92.1 FM when you give them a call, 801-877-9976, or book your first consultation online at steelvault.com. They've got a big Book Now button right on there. Again, in the middle of the valley, over in Holiday, comprehensive hormone treatments, wrinkles, hair loss, weight loss, all the stuff that you might need as you exit your prime, especially as a male. And you know what? It's not just for the men. Take your wife, take your significant other in there too, and get your health back in order at Steel Vault and steelvault.com. All right, the house settlement. We've alluded to it a couple of times today. It's supposed to be coming to fruition or being made official before this 2025 football season starts. This would allow athletic departments to pay players directly to revenue share $20.5 million per year. But all these proposals keep coming up. These new wrinkles keep being added. And I'm going to tell you in 3 minutes the messiest one that I have seen so far. A threat to the house settlement actually coming down, and it is a wild idea. Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, Sean O'Connell Show. We're going to get some NBA draft talk in 10 minutes or so. I'm trying to keep you up to date on the latest with the House versus NCAA settlement. And we keep calling it that, the House versus NCAA settlement. It's $2.8 billion plus injunctive relief, which means that moving forward, athletic departments will share revenue with players, share revenue with basketball, football, revenue-producing sports, student athletes on campus, etc. The result of a class action suit against the NCAA. The settlement is, of course, the NCAA saying, like, all right, yeah, we probably should have been paying some money all along, so let's settle this thing, and nobody will be mad. The judge has not yet fully ratified this thing. We're not across the finish line, and new proposals are being laid out pretty much every single day. And this is a latest wrinkle that could make things very, very interesting and is crazy messy. The newest version of the House versus NCAA settlement contemplates allowing athletes who are not yet in college, so recruits, to opt out of the settlement and say, nope, I don't want to be part of this revenue sharing model because it's not sufficient. It's not enough. I don't want to be subject to any limitations being put on my earnings just because I've decided to sign up and collect part of my revenue share. Now, this is, weirdly enough, I am currently part of a class action lawsuit against the UFC, and they offered you the opportunity to opt out. It was a class of 1,200 fighters that the court determined were owed back pay, more pay because of illegal negotiating practices by the UFC, monopolistic practices by the UFC, and they settled out of court on that, and so everyone's going to get some money from it. And when you were part of the class, you were sent an official legal form that said, if you sign this, you're not part of the class, which means you don't get any of the money from the settlement, but you're motivated, or some people were motivated, to send that opt-out back because it means that you can individually sue. You can individually go after, and you're not part of the settlement, meaning if you accept the money from the settlement, NCAA won, the UFC won, any settlement, you're effectively saying, okay, we're even now. All good. I've agreed that this $1 million I'm going to get, this $100 I'm going to get, this whatever it ends up being for NCAA athletes, this $50,000 a year that I'm going to get, that's enough for me. I'm okay with that. Or this new proposal here is that if you're a high school recruit, you could be like, no, I don't want the settlement money. I don't want the revenue sharing money. I want my own money. You know what that looks like, James? That looks like the current system of college football and college basketball, the Wild West of NIL. This is an opportunity for student athletes to opt out of revenue sharing, and then they're not subject to any of the rules of the settlement or of the revenue sharing agreement. So maybe they get zero, but maybe they say, you know what? I'm AJ DeBonsa, BYU. I don't want your $100,000 that's going to every single basketball player and to be limited in my NIL deals or anything like that. I want to make my own deal. I want to negotiate my own salary. I don't want to be part of the settlement. I don't want to be part of the agreements that come out of the settlement. I want to live in the Wild West. This is potentially another hang-up and another option, and here's the scariest thing about it. If you opt out of the settlement, it means that in the future, guess what you get to do? You get to sue your institution. You get to sue your NCAA. You get to sue your coach. You get to sue your collective. That's what it really opens up. If you opt out of the settlement before you even get to college, it means that any time while you're in college, down the road after college, you could say, you know what? Turns out that they were still making billions of dollars off my back. I'm going to go back and sue them again. If this is allowed, I promise you, every recruit in the country with anything like a 4 or 5 star recruit with high earning potential is going to opt out of the settlement. And they're not going to get their $100,000 or their $500,000 or their revenue sharing share, their piece. But they are going to leave the possibility open for themselves to get millions and millions after the fact. And that means the settlement is effectively useless to the future generations of college sports.
Yeah, that's I question their judgment putting that option in there. Although, not a lawyer, I'm sure there's very valid reasons that they felt like they had to do that or wanted to do that. But it's like, I thought this was about bringing organization to some of this chaos. Apparently it's not.
Well, what it does is it just leaves the door open for you to live in this Wild West.
I guess so.
And
it's
by
crazy
the way,
that
the House settlement doesn't fix everything, not by any stretch of the imagination.
It brings some order, but there's still a lot that needs to come into order.
But this opt-out would mean that whatever is settled by this settlement, you're like, nope, I'm not settled.
It's
my
weird.
part in this is not settled.
Yeah, it's weird that, okay, we're going to keep track of the individuals who opt in and the individuals who didn't opt in. Like, that's going to be such a headache to deal with. Like, why open that up for even an option? I mean, maybe they feel like I said, there's probably reasons that I don't understand, not being privy to everything and not having the legal the background to understand some of the legal part of all of this that made them feel like they needed to put that opt-out clause in there. But it's like, do you want more headache or do you not, or do you want less headache?
Well, do you want more headache or do you want less money? Because
I guess that's it.
Because that's what that's what the calculus would be for the players, the individuals who want to opt out. It's certainly less headache to go in and know, all right, I just signed with BYU. I'm going to get they're distributing $20 million and they're using 15 of that for the football team only. I'm one of 100 players on the football team. They've got $15 million. I get my fair share. They're gonna split it up. I'm a quarterback, so I'm gonna get $250,000. But part of this proposal, and it's far from being finalized, part of this proposal is, but if you take revenue share money, we're capping your earnings. That's your salary cap, basically.
Yeah. And
you have to truly get endorsement deals beyond that. Like, you can't be getting NIL money is, again, one of the proposals, one of the things.
Yeah, you're going to have to seek real NIL.
Like, it's real,
not
it's like you're in a commercial.
Pay for play NIL that is the case now. Yeah.
That's the idea, at least.
And I guess what I mean by the headache is NCAA, the conferences, the individual institutions, they're going to have more of a headache having to keep track of who's opt into this and who is under these constraints and who isn't. Like, I don't understand why they would open themselves up to that, but like I said, they probably had reasons why they felt like they had to. I hope we see other proposals that don't include this, to be honest with you, OC. It may be better for players individually because they won't have NIL money capped and they have to do real NIL to get paid. But it doesn't seem like it's good for anyone else.
Well, we'll see how it plays out, but Darren Heitner is one of the first movers on the NIL attorney front, and he's got a bunch of stuff on this. And whether
I'll have to check it out.
It makes more sense if opting out of the settlement means that any income that you have coming in is not subject to scrutiny by the new rules that the settlement helps to establish, then for a Travis Hunter level player, a Shedeur Sanders level player, a Cam Rising level player, it actually makes more sense for you to opt out. If you think you're going to be the star of the school, the star on the big man on campus, then why would you want there to be a salary cap? This is why all of this needed to be taken care of and figured out before the Wild West happened.
Absolutely.
We've talked for years how you can't unring the bell. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, James. And this settlement is an attempt to do exactly that. And here, look, Just one little wrinkle in the language, one little clause, but you can opt out if you like. And now the whole thing goes up in smoke. It's nuts.
It really is. I have to shout out real quick a texter who basically has said in more ways than one that frustrated with the lack of integrity that baseball is showing in making Pete Rose eligible. It's been a fun back and forth with him. I haven't disagreed with him or anything, so it's not been a debate. But I wanted to shout out. He said, "Sorry, I'm grumpy today." And I said, "You're all good. Thanks for sharing." And he said, "Be honest, I look like Spence Checketts chiming in, don't I?" I said, "Hey, you haven't been that grumpy." So if Spence is listening, you're still the grumpiest guy. You're not the grumpy. Anyway, shout out to our texter, sharing their thoughts about the baseball changing their minds on Pete Rose.
ESPN 792.1 FM excited to welcome Matt Rife to the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater on June 6th. Listen to The Drive with Spence Checketts this week for your chance to win a pair of tickets. ESPN700sports.com for more info and ticket links. Rafael Barlow, NBA draft consultant and host of the NBA Big Board podcast, joins us next. What can you get at number 5? Con Knipple? Are we all going to become Knipplers? It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
7 to shoot. His team is down by 3. Pirouettes, tosses it up. Oh! Joker's wild!
That was a 3-pointer to tie the game. Last night's Nuggets' eventual loss to the Thunder. Game 5 of the second round series, courtesy of TNT Sports. Ian Eagle on the call. OKC now up in that series 3-2. Game 6 tomorrow night. We'll have it right here on your home of the NBA playoffs. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. That 3-pointer was so ridiculous because Jokic was just up against the shot clock. Terrible look. Defender, like, not in his face, all up in his grill, like belly to belly, basically. I don't even think he jumped. And somehow sinks that 3-pointer. Probably the best player in the world. The top 2 MVP candidates going back and forth in a really, really stellar series. Is just, it's fun to watch. On the other side of things in the NBA, Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs eliminated. And immediately a lot of the reaction, a lot of the talk is about how devastating, how embarrassing that is for not only Donovan but the other players on the team, how difficult it's going to be for them to run it back because, salaries and second apron penalties and all these things come into play for Cleveland. When you have the best season, the best regular season in the NBA, and then you don't make it to even your conference finals, that is a disappointing year. And look, Cleveland they're not in the same situation as Jazz fans are with no championships ever. They've been spoiled by having LeBron and then getting LeBron back and having him deliver a championship and make good on that whole hometown hero story. But, man, that is a rough ending to what was an incredibly promising year for a really loaded roster that then gets very expensive to try and maintain for Cleveland. Out and eliminated from the playoffs. Tonight at 5, you got Boston, New York. New York is in control of that series. And Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota Timberwolves could close it out against Golden State tonight in the later game. But we'll talk a little bit of Utah Jazz. NBA draft consultant, host of the NBA Big Board podcast, Rafael Barlow, joins me right now. Rafael, welcome back to the show. How are you? Rafael, can you hear me? Hello. One more try here. Rafael, you got me? All right. Well, I guess we don't have Rafael Barlow on the show at this moment. That's all right. He might be muted, James is telling me. All right, we'll figure it out. As everyone knows, and I think people are probably they just wadded it up and threw it away. I don't know how many people are still sweating this one out, but the Utah Jazz with the number 5 pick in this year's NBA draft, that was statistically the most likely spot for you to land. It felt like a huge disappointment because obviously you had a 14% chance of getting the number 1 pick. And if you weren't going to get the number 1 pick, you probably would have been disappointed, but settled for number 2. And if you don't get 1 or 2, you're probably going to be okay with the fact that you fall down to number 3. And instead you go to 5, which was your worst case scenario. Couldn't have gone worse for the Utah Jazz. After an historically bad season, the worst season in franchise history, after a deliberate effort to be the embarrassment of the league, to be the bad version of the Utah Jazz, you end up with really nothing to show for it, and that is a hard lesson to learn over 82 games. That is a tedious way to prove to yourself that not wanting to compete, not trying to compete on an honest level is ultimately not the right thing to do. Tanking has not proved to be a viable strategy, a winning strategy, of course, tanking's not a winning strategy, but a fruitful strategy for any of the teams that have engaged in the practice since the 2019 draft lottery format change. And I think if Ryan Smith's tweet is anything to read into, they might have to alter the strategy with the Utah Jazz on how to move forward with this. In other NBA news, it was official. We speculated on this, and it ended up being the exact case. Jason Tatum did rupture his Achilles, and he's already had surgery to repair the right Achilles tendon. That was a Tuesday afternoon surgery, and no timetable has been offered for his eventual return. But we know this. It's going to take a while. It's going to be long. All right, another shot here. Let's give it another try. Raphael Barlow, NBA draft consultant and host of the NBA Big Board podcast. Raphael, we got you now?
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Aha, we got you. Yes, I can hear you. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good.
What are the Utah Jazz going to be able to find at 5 if that's where they stay in this upcoming NBA draft?
If the Jazz stay at 5, I think Trey Johnson from Texas. I mean, that would be my choice. I think that he has the upside and the potential to be a 20 to 25 point per game scorer. And he shot the ball very well at the combine yesterday, but it's not a surprise to me. He shot 3% at Texas on a heavy volume of attempts, and a lot of those attempts are heavily contested. So Trey Johnson is the best option for Utah at 5.
So a player like that at 5 can be the what option for a quality team? I mean, is he someone who you could see growing into being a number one scoring option on a team that is at least flirting with the playoffs?
I really do. SEC.
All right. Unfortunately, Raphael does not have a solid connection, so we're going to have to try this another time because not able to really hear what's going on there. Apologies for the technical difficulties, and thanks to Raphael for giving it a couple tries to jump on here. We'll do it another day, James. No worries. Thank Raphael for his efforts. Technical difficulties are a pain, but they plague us all at some point. All right, so look, we've heard a couple of different names at number 5 for the Utah Jazz. I think that's maybe the third or fourth different name we've heard. One thing that everybody does bring up, though, and it's reflective of where we're at in the NBA right now, it's always about, what they are as an athlete, which, of course, you have to talk about in today's NBA. And then maybe the second point that people bring up is the three-point shooting ability. You got to have someone that can score the three ball. And the shot from the outside has – I don't know if it's going to stay this way forever, but it has become the number one weapon in NBA basketball, and I think it's going to stay that way for a long time, if not forever. And you got to make sure you have guys that can do that, and every player – making their way through an AAU circuit into the college recruiting picture, and obviously spending any time in college or if they're overseas or wherever, that's something that everyone – doesn't matter your size these days. You got to be able to shoot. Doesn't matter how explosive and athletic you are. I don't care if you're Blake Griffin. You got to be able to shoot the three ball now, and that's something that everyone is talking about with these potential available prospects for that number 5 pick. Again, I think the Utah Jazz are going to make phone calls. I think that Danny Ainge and Justin Zanuck and those guys are going to say, hey, what would it take for us to get up to number 1? I think you're going to be laughed out of the room with that. What would it take to get to number 2, though, San Antonio? That's a conversation they're probably more willing to engage in. When I say they, I mean San Antonio. So we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out. Hopefully all of you out there that are dyed-in-the-wool Jazz fans are shaking off your disappointment. And maybe you gave out a loud, audible scream and then just went about your day because this is Utah.
Maybe you had a frustrated run yesterday morning, maybe this morning too.
Maybe you did.
And then you remembered this is Utah, and it made everything all better.
I'm bothered that he said this is Utah instead of, and then I remembered I'm a billionaire, and I just let the water fall off my back. We're talking about the tweet from Ryan Smith, the Utah Jazz owner, Utah Hockey Club owner. You know what would have been better? If he said, and then I remembered, we are Mammoth.
Yeah.
And just let it be that.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, what? Yeah, I forgot. We got a good draft pick.
We are Mammoth.
Our captain's killing it right now. And
then I remembered I own another team who had really good lottery luck. In to the point where they are San Antonio, as we heard Brogan Houston say, where they want to entertain trades. And if the trade offers don't yield what you want, okay, we'll just take a really good player at 4th overall. Like that. Then I remembered that, and I got less frustrated about the Jazz not getting number 1 overall pick.
Then I remembered that we will be a Stanley Cup playoff team in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm going to be selling a grip of jerseys for Tija Ginla as soon as he shows up on the NHL stage, because that's a name that even casual hockey fans know.
Yeah, I know Tija Ginla. Like that's a good litmus test for how recognizable the Ginla name is.
By the way, I hope that Jerome comes to like every single game that his son is playing in.
Yes. That'd be amazing. That would be
like
Utah would have that franchise legend. He never played for even the Arizona Coyotes, but we could adopt him as a franchise legend.
It's like if you by proxy are able in Utah to like find a way you get to claim Dwayne Wade a little bit, and you get to claim Jerome Ginla. I mean, you're doing well. You're doing well with your claims by proxy.
By the way, full circle moment on the show for you. One of the first things you talked about on your very first show was reaction to Tija Ginla and comparing him to Bronny James.
Oh, yeah.
And now here we are.
Here we
are coming up on the NHL draft about a month away, talking about it again.
And we haven't even been on the air for a year, James.
I know.
It's pretty wild.
It is wild.
Feels like it's been 10.
Yeah. It really has. Going back to what you were saying about guys who could be available at the number 5 pick, and we tried to get Rafael Barlow's perspective on that. We'll get him on the show another time. He's been good for us. I think he's been on maybe just one other time. So we're excited to try to get him on again. Tony Jones has been tweeting today, which, hey, breaking news, Tony Jones tweeting. No, he's been tweeting a lot about he thinks Ace Bailey will drop to 5. I don't know. He hasn't said it's based on any kind of conversations he had. It's kind of just, I guess, some intuition of his. He thinks
you want me to rely on Tony's intuition here?
I know, but he's saying Ace will be available at 5. He's saying Trey Johnson and VJ Edgecombe will go ahead of Ace Bailey, which, if that's the case, this could be, a slight exaggeration here, but this could be when we talked about the Celtics lucking into getting Jason Tatum 3rd overall.
All right.
This could be that type of thing. I mean, not saying Ace Bailey is as pro-ready as Jason Tatum was coming out of college. That's most certainly not the case. Almost certainly not the case. But that's a guy, if he is available at 5, you're looking around going, we better take this guy before someone jumps in and tries to take him away from us, because it's a guy who's going to be a bit of a long-term project, but he's one of only 3 guys in this draft that has superstar potential.
Can I make a confession here on air?
Yeah.
That
safe space.
I tweeted it out when, like, immediately after the Jazz fell to 5. And more importantly, more to my chagrin than the Jazz ending up picking at number 5, when I saw that the Dallas Mavericks got number 1, 2 years removed from a NBA Finals appearance, the Dallas Mavericks got the number 1 overall pick. It's disgusting. It's stupid. And I don't care if you disagree with my conspiracy takes. I'm going to lean into them, whatever. But I tweeted out, like, hey, we're a hockey town now. I'm trying. It's probably a bad idea for me to admit this, but I really don't think that I can care about what goes on with this Utah Jazz until whoever they draft, and maybe it's Ace Bailey, maybe it's Trey Johnson, maybe it's Con Knippel, maybe it's I don't know who it's going to be. I really don't. But if that guy ends up being what Donovan Mitchell became, if that guy ends up being what Lauri Markkanen 100% healthy is, if that guy ends up being like, then I will be able to re-engage on a serious level. I reserve the right to change my opinion here, but I am so disgusted by the way that this process has worked out, by the stick with us, guys, it's going to be a tough year, but next year is going to be better. And then it's like I got Stockholm syndrome here, where it's like you're trapped with this abuser who's like, no, I won't do it anymore. We're being gaslit. Hey, guys, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Just bear with me. It's going to be fine. I didn't mean to do that. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, it's not going to be better. Next year is not going to be better for the Utah Jazz. Unless there's like this mega surprise, and it's not the biggest surprise in the world if a number 5 overall pick ends up being great. Maybe whoever you get with the 20-something Minnesota pick ends up being Jokic. But until that happens, I'm having a really, really hard time mustering enthusiasm for like the rest of this process. And I know that there are people working their behinds off in the Jazz building right now to make sure you maximize number 5, or maybe it ends up being number 3. Maybe you trade up and it's number 2. I know that there are a lot of people, good people, smart people, who are dedicated to making this process go as well as it can possibly go from here on out. But because the ping pong balls or the manipulation of the magnets worked out the way that it did, I'm like, you know what? I'm disengaged for now. I'm exhausted by this whole – I spent months being like, yeah, guys, I know it sucks, but it's going to get better because you might get Cooper Flagg. Or if you don't get Cooper Flagg, you're going to get Dylan Harper. And I was lying the whole time, and it sucks. So I don't know, James. I have fatigue now, and we haven't even got to the draft.
Yeah, and I said in the weeks leading up to this draft lottery to try to give some perspective and some context. Hoodwinked. You know,
great word.
In this whole process. And being very frustrated about that, wanting to audibly scream on a morning run because of it. Like, you're not the only one. So what I would say to people like you, I think what will help is to know that this was going to last a couple more years, at least a couple more years anyway. And I know you already understand that.
Yes, but
I'm not sure there's a lot of fans that quite understood that. I think a lot of fans thought we do this, we get Cooper Flagg, and then we're good. It's still going to take a little bit longer.
There's a much different mindset, though, right? Okay, so I'm very thankful for the fact that before the home prices in Utah skyrocketed with the COVID years, I'm very thankful that I was able to get into owning property before that happened, right? I imagine the feeling for a lot of individuals right now is like, I'm never going to be able to own a home. It's like, how am I ever going to be able to purchase a house? Now, it's okay to have that feeling, and it's okay to feel that way, but that feeling changes very drastically if, like, tomorrow somebody hires you for a really good job. You can't buy a house right away, right? If tomorrow you get a job that's going to pay you, I don't know, $150,000 a year. That's a really healthy, happy salary, okay? Even though housing is expensive in Utah, you can make a nice life making that kind of money, all right? If somebody gives you that job tomorrow, suddenly everything is different. Now, you can't buy a house immediately. You got to wait until you have 2 years' worth of tax returns on that income. You got to be able to prove to your lender that this is a reliable source of income. But your mindset changes so drastically because you're just like, no, you know what? It's going to be okay. Eventually, I am going to get to that promised land of home ownership because I have this job. I have a career. And even if that job doesn't pay what you need right now, I have now a path where I can climb this ladder and everything's going to be okay. That's what a Cooper Flagg or maybe an Ace Bailey, who you could get at 5, or a Dylan Harper, like that's the job. That's what that represents. Being able to get that guy, that number 1, number 2, number 3 pick, being able to get that guy, you're like, you know what? It's not going to fix our problems immediately, but it gives you light at the end of the tunnel. And the disenfranchisement I am feeling right now, and a lot of Jazz fans that I've talked to are feeling right now, is because the light at the end of the tunnel that you were promised and that was dangled in front of you, that was snuffed out on Monday. And it was just like, okay, well, good luck. Maybe you'll get the good job next year. In 3 years after that, you'll be able to buy the home.
It turns out it was just a mirror showing the light at the other end of the tunnel when you entered this rebuild.
What you were doing is you were actually looking through a window to the Dallas Mavericks light at the end of the tunnel.
It really does suck, and it makes people want to scream, "This is Utah." By the way, we got a great text that said we need "This is Utah" all caps T-shirts. I absolutely agree.
Yes, somebody make those. This is Utah. Oh, James. This is Utah, and you do it with the Tusk U.
Yes.
Come on.
Come on, baby. Tusk, Utah.
We are Mammoth.
This is Tusk, Utah's #1 sports talk. Let's go.
All right.
Maybe.
Well, thanks to whoever
I'll
just gave us a great T-shirt idea. ESPN 792.1 FM Festival of Tees, powered by the Utah Golf Association and Mountain America Credit Union, giving away 18 holes to Talon's Cove. That's coming up in about 15 minutes. We'll take a quick one here. We'll come back with some red and blue. Jerem Jordan joins us. We'll talk about BYU football's offseason and their new athletic director, who's replacing Tom Holmoe. Jerem Jordan will tell you next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Little Red and Blue today brought to you by our friends at E3 Energy Cubes, e3energy.com. Check out all the great flavors, no high glycemic sweeteners, natural ingredients, sustainable energy, E3 Energy Cubes. It's been a while since we caught up with our good friend Jerem Jordan, and he's kind enough to join us now. Large development, a significant development in the BYU athletic department as they have tabbed the permanent replacement for Tom Holmoe, who's stepping away at the end of this athletic year as athletic director. Jerem Jordan, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Sean, what is good, my brother? Last time we talked, it was just the Utah Hockey Club. Now it's the Utah Mammoth. We got a new athletic director at BYU. Things are happening.
We going Tusks up, Jerem? Are we all? Are you?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
I'm all in. You know I'm in. I've seen you at a Utah Hockey Club, now Utah Mammoth game. Tusks up, dude. And who knew that Pat McAfee would create the unofficial symbol of the squad?
I tell you what, I'm loving it. The double tusk gesture. Utah fans are going to have a hard time with it because that is now also the Shaka has been adopted as the BYUY. But you know what? It bring the Mammoth bring us all together. Double up and make it a Tusk, and everything's fine.
Let's go. We need to be in the Stanley Cup final in the next, 3 seasons. Vegas got won their first year, but yeah, I'm all in, man. It's exciting. Let's get an MLB team here by the end of the decade. Then the Olympics come around. Things are happening in this market. It's a fun time to be living in Utah.
Yeah, we're a bona fide sports town now.
Yes, we are.
Brian Santiago, new athletic director at Brigham Young University, a man who's been in and around the program for a long time, has deep ties there. So I think probably for most people, maybe not surprising given that. But tell me the reaction and the thought process. It was a national search, but ultimately it's Brian Santiago. What do you think?
I'm not sure anyone was more prepared to take BYU to the next step than perhaps Brian, because he's been in the room for some of the biggest moments in BYU sports the last 20 years. If you think about it, I would argue that Tom Holmoe is the greatest athletic director the BYU's ever had. He led him into the modern era, led him out of the Mountain West into independence and the West Coast Conference, into the Big 12, where BYU this last year had great success in a lot of sports, namely football and men's basketball. Brian was the number 2 for this period over the last 10-plus years, and so he certainly knows what it took to get to this point. He has been mentored and been right there for a lot of these decisions. Certainly, people talk about his influence on the men's basketball side in finding Kevin Young, who seemingly has changed BYU overnight from a team that now didn't make the NIT to the Sweet 16 and now brings in a team that's lauded as top 5, top 10 in the country. I mean, that turnaround and that hire was significant. And obviously football, you keep it going. And so as a guy that understands the mission of BYU sports that have to do with on the field, the academic, the spiritual nature of that. So he's been prepared for this, and he feels like he's ready. And Shane Reese and Keith Vorkink and the Board of Trustees have acknowledged as much as well. So here we go.
He's going to be tasked with, this next year, whether the predictions are correct or not, there's going to be a lot of attention on BYU athletics because of some of the things that you just talked about. The way too early top 25s, I'm seeing BYU top 10, top 15 in football. The basketball thing, even higher than that. You're going to have A.J. DeBonsa on campus sooner than later. And that's a big moment. Does BYU as a campus, a student body, an athletic department need to do anything to get ready for this in your mind?
I think BYU's ready. I think BYU's been ready for this kind of opportunity and momentum for a long time. BYU's craved a power league for a long time. Utah got it in 2011, and BYU did the best it could with independence and an ESPN deal after that. But I think the Cougars have been ready for a long time, and certainly the success of last year was amazing. The next step for BYU is, okay, how do you sustain this? How do you continue to apply yourself at this level? We're seeing recruiting at a new level for BYU. We're seeing donorship and NIL at a new level with BYU. The relevance has never been higher. I think we're in a golden era for Cougar sports that could only be rivaled maybe by the late 70s to mid 80s with what BYU is kind of hoping to accomplish and doing it now a higher level in a power league. So it's exciting, but obviously it has to be sustained. And today, Brian Santiago talked about, hey, to be relevant, we have to win, and then we can, the message of BYU sports can go from there. So you got to win, and you got to do it a certain way at BYU, and BYU's been doing it, and Brian Santiago hopes to continue that as the leader of the Cougs.
The win total by Circa Sports, the big sports book, 7.5 for BYU. No Big 12 team got a lot of love. Utah's at 7.5. BYU's at 7.5. There's like 4 teams set at 7.5. I was like, well, really? I mean, the same.
Hammer the over.
Okay. I mean, I wasn't expecting any other response from you, but 7.5 feels low for a team that had 11 wins last. I should say it's a regular season win total, so It doesn't account for bowl game, but still a 10-win season last year, and a lot of important personnel coming back. Your starting quarterback coming back. It felt kind of low, but when you look at the floor and the ceiling, and we'll have this conversation again closer to the season, it feels like 7.5. 7-8 games would be more of the floor we would set for BYU than a ceiling.
Oh, 100%. Like I would be disappointed by 8-4. Like obviously that for any college football team, that's a good regular season. But when you go 10-2 in the regular season, 11-2 last year, and you have the kind of team the BYU had, the rhetoric, the conversation, the narrative internally on this team of what they're kind of saying amongst themselves and feeling and creating is that they want to be in the Big 12 title game. That's the next step, right? They felt like they were real close to the college football playoff. Obviously, after the Utah win, BYU had to win 2 out of 3. They lost 2 out of 3. It was disappointing to lose to Kansas and Arizona State. Arizona State, you understand, Kansas at home was tough. Granted, Kansas beat 3 ranked teams in a row as an unranked team. That was the first time that ever happened in college football history. That was disappointing. So BYU feels like, hey, can we continue what we did last year? That's certainly the hope. BYU fans hope that. Can the ball, and I would ask, can the ball bounce your way as many times as it bounced? You got to get a certain amount of kind of luck, and obviously you got to put yourself in position to win. Can the defense take the ball away 29 times again? That was an amazing number. BYU led the FBS in interceptions with 22. Special teams, I would argue, was elite with 5 kick and punt returns combined for touchdowns. Will Farron, an amazing field goal kicker. They did a great job on special teams. Offense, to me, was good. I think they can take the next step to be very good. They used short fields to their advantage. They were efficient when needed, took advantage of the takeaways. So it's going to be a different season. And right now the schedule looks favorable for BYU. Last year it looked really hard, and then, frankly, it was a little easier than they thought, and they took advantage of that. So every year is different. But that 7.5 feels super low. And frankly, BYU and Utah, I expect Utah to rebound in a good way. I think it's going to be a fun season for both. And I'm interested to see how it shakes out. Is there any team where you go, oh, they're the clear-cut favorite in the Big 12? No way. To me, ASU is getting a lot of love with no Scadaboo there. I can see where they're good again, but for them to kind of be the clear-cut favorite just because they did it last year, they lost the 1 draft pick. They lost a massive piece of their offense. I think it's going to be a fun race. ASU, obviously, Texas Tech put a ton of money into the program, reports of 30 or 40 million. Holy cow. And then you got Kansas State, and it's going to be a fun race to see who ends up in the top 2 there in the Big 12.
Yeah, we talked about that whole situation with Arizona State without Cam Scadaboo. When you lose your best player, and now a lot of teams, it's like your quarterback goes, and then people start to question, I guess because he's a running back, but he was the guy, when they needed a play, he was the guy who made the play for him. And now
literally could catch, throw, do everything.
Yeah,
he made so many plays in that playoff game.
And now your quarterback, by the way, they're paying Levitt like $4 million or something. And it's like, okay, now that's you. That's your job. And I think he's a promising young player, but that's a big ask. So we'll see how it plays out. By the way, the win totals predicted by Vegas here, no one in the Big 12 given a higher win total than 8.5. So they're expecting parity in the league. Do you expect the same thing, that this conference chews itself up?
Certainly seems like it right now because you don't have someone who kind of – if ASU had Scadaboo, that number would be 9.5 for them, right? They would be – he's that big of an influence for their team. And I thought he was an amazing collegiate running back. I'm interested to see how he does with the Giants. But, it's going to be – I think that's fun. Yet, let's be honest, as a league, it's better if there's a dominant team, a powerhouse, a team that's consistent, kind of rocking it every year. That helps everybody. So that certainly doesn't help sort of the Big 12 to me, is kind of this wide open race. You need a team that's like the team consistently over time. Hey, they're in the playoff every other year kind of deal. So we'll see who kind of maybe takes that spot. But right now it feels pretty wide open, which for BYU is going to walk into the team into the season in an interesting spot. The Cougars seek the motivation to be underrated, like just historically. No one thinks we can do it. Let's show them. The motivation for BYU will be if they're fourth in the preseason poll by the coaches or this 7.5 number or whatever, they will cling on to anything that's like, you don't think we're going to win it. So anything barring number one, I think BYU comes in pretty motivated using that in a way. Because last year they hated that 4.5 number out of Vegas. They were like, 4.5, we'll show you in week 5.
How big a loss is Harrison Taggart?
It is a loss, but and it's a bummer that he's going to Cal. But Siale Acera is a guy that they've been very excited about for the last couple of years, and now he's ready. Coming off some injuries, he was healthy in spring. I think his ceiling's higher than Harrison. Harrison was a good player, but I think Siale's kind of got a higher opportunity there with kind of the high-end talent. Harrison, though, made a ton of plays last year. It is significant. What I don't like is when someone transfers and they go, well, we didn't need him anyway. No. It would have been great to have Harrison Taggart. That's a good player. But from my conversations with people, they are very excited about Siale getting a bigger opportunity now.
Is BYU in a position now where if you want to keep a guy, you can keep him if it's about money? Like it feels like maybe the Cougs have graduated into that level of support. We knew that it was happening with basketball. It seems like with last year's football season and some of the recruiting battles they won in the transfer portal, retention seems to me like it wouldn't be a problem if that, I don't dispute the Acera thing. He's a bright young player. So if a guy's getting a good offer from Cal, you maybe say, all right, well, we'd love for you to stay, but we're not going to get into some bidding war here. But if they wanted to, are they in a position where they can basically afford to keep whoever they want to now?
I think there's a philosophical sort of situation there more than if it's straight bidding war. I think BYU is going to be like, if it's about money, go ahead. We'll find someone else. The motivation that BYU kind of wants with why a person is on a team is not motivated by that. And that's probably the case for most programs. You want a certain attitude associated with it, not dollar bills. But again, at the end of the season, what we're not privy to is what are the conversations about the perception of that player in that role? Who's behind them? What does that player want relative to playing time and opportunity, not to mention NIL? What was that conversation like? I think that we would probably understand more of some of these moves if we were privy to more of that information. Because certainly it seems weird for Keelan Marion to be on a top 15 preseason team and then bounce and go to Miami, which, hey, Miami was good, but I think BYU walk in probably ranked higher than Miami and have a better chance of the playoff than maybe Miami. Who knows, right? And you were the guy here and beloved, and you had 2 kickoff returns for touchdown. You do that again this next year, you're probably getting drafted just based on that skill alone. So, yeah, there's different motivations for different guys. So it's hard to kind of plug and play this is the situation for everyone in this specific situation. But I think BYU in football just feels a little different, Sean. It doesn't feel like basketball in terms of that mentality, mainly because BYU's got, as you mentioned, really competitive NIL in football. But I don't know that it's the same as men's hoops, where men's hoops is has a couple of big time donors that are no, we're going to make this happen. Football is a good amount too. Don't get me wrong, but I think the motivation and sort of how football presents itself makes it just a touch different.
Last thing before I let you go, not a BYU question. Pete Rose, Hall of Famer or not?
The writers are going to have to decide that, right? Which is interesting. He can be in, but will the writers put him in? His on-the-field play, there's no question. It's just whether that you sort of want to stick to your guns and the sort of morality of gambling and whatnot. Hey, he said he was gambling on his own team to win. That would be interesting. Would I put him in? I don't know. I haven't thought about it that hard, but it is wild to be wait, all of the White Sox with shoeless Joe Jackson are good now that they're dead? there were 15 dudes. It wasn't just those two. We'll watch Field of Dreams maybe a little bit differently, right? With Shoeless Joe now.
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. I haven't thought too hard about sort of what I would do in that situation. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to end up getting in, but we'll see. I think that our public opinion of gambling now has changed so much.
Very different.
That people are going to be like, even though I think it's massively important that he was gambling on his own team, I don't care if Tom Brady gambles on baseball games, but I care if like Shohei Ohtani, who also did, by the way, gambles on baseball games. Anyway,
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly. That was his interpreter.
Yeah. Chris Carter, right? He was the NFL player, said, got to have a fall guy. That's
Gotta have a fall guy.
You got to have a fall guy.
Wow.
You got it. Shohei had one, his interpreter. Anyway, Jeremy, you're the man. Got to let you go. Appreciate your time.
Sean, thanks, brother.
All right, we'll give away some golf. We'll talk to Spence Checketts to close out the show next on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, 18 holes to Talon's Cove, courtesy of the Festival of Tees, Utah Golf Association, Mountain America Credit Union. 18 holes, if you can tell me. The highest win total set by Vegas for the Big 12 Conference was what? 877-353-0700. Highest win total set by the Vegas book at Circa, which is the big sports book. Highest win total for the upcoming Big 12 football season was set at how many wins? Sean O'Connell Show wrapping up. The Drive with Spence Checketts is next. Your mic's working. Hey, Spence.
Can you hear me?
I can.
I can't hear anything in my headset. Is that an issue? What do we got?
Is there a dial? Oh, wait. Which one? This one?
Hey, there we go.
Okay, so that's okay. My headphones are controlled over here. Yours are controlled here.
Perfect. Well,
Okay.
learn something new every day. I got you.
There we go.
I got you loud and clear.
All right.
Hello, Sean.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Great.
It's cold outside.
Yeah, it's cold.
I wish it was warmer. But at least it's not 110 in the studio.
Yeah.
That makes it nice.
That is nice.
How was Jason today?
Great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Little soccer talk on the
Little
OC
soccer
show?
talk. Opened with it. First guest of the day.
I
little RSL.
tuned in for a little
Heck
bit.
yeah, man.
So what do you think about the match tonight?
You know what? It's just like Jason said. You can't make any mistakes.
Mhm.
They've got a really vicious attack.
Yeah.
They're going to make you pay for those things.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's a squad that's just a little bit further down the development line than what RSL is looking at right now.
Look at you. I'm so impressed.
I didn't want to get too in the weeds about the goal differential for RSL right now.
Smart.
But unacceptable, man.
Smart. Yeah, but you know why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
We all do.
We all know why.
Other than the soccer convo, what was we all know why he says. What was running the show today?
You know, we talked about the win total set by Vegas. That's always fun, and we'll see. This is kind of the first one we've seen this year. We talked about Pete Rose. Is he going to get into the Hall of Fame or not?
Mm-hmm.
Another obstacle in the way of the House settlement, with players being potentially able to opt out of the settlement and the rules that touch the settlement. So, yeah, it just keeps on chugging along. Donovan Mitchell is out of the playoffs, and he's embarrassed by it. Now the Cavs are never going to make it back there ever for the rest of their franchise history. So, yeah, we talked about all of it.
Yeah, Donovan's post-game presser last night cracked me up a little bit. Time to drop some F-bombs. Time to show that I'm edgy.
Okay, cool.
You know, y'all are going to write, the whole thing, the whole Donovan thing. It's interesting to consider because he was so good all regular season long. Just to consider whether or not this is who he is in this league. Can he be the best player on a team that wins a championship? I'll tell you who did the calculation and said no was New York. That's why they decided to go after Jalen Brunson. And that's why I got a kick out of Donovan. He's like, yeah, I love Cleveland. I'm all in, 10 toes on the ground. I'm staying here. It's like, dude, nobody in New York wanted you. The Knicks didn't want you, and Brooklyn's rebuilding.
It's kind of mean.
But it's also kind of true. That's kind of the MO of the Drive, 2 to 6. Kind of mean, but kind of true.
I asked all of our basketball gets when the playoffs started, like, is Rudy going to make it further or is Donovan going to make it further? And I understand. The goalposts are different for those two guys and the roles they play on their team. But I've been Team Rudy the whole way, and he's making it further into these playoffs. So.
Yeah, and I think they win tonight. We'll see what happens with the Knicks. How's my guy Jerem? How's my dog Jerem?
Jerem Jordan is, look, one of the best guests you can have on radio to talk about his subject matter. I love talking to Jerem. I know that, we have like a certain allotment that the fans that listen to the Home of the Utes will allow you to talk BYU. He knows everything about that athletic department, everything about every one of those teams. We didn't even get a chance to talk any rugby with him, but he's all deep into that too with the Utah Warriors. So one of my favorite guys in the Utah market is in terms of sports personalities. Jerem Jordan.
Big day down there. I watched the introductory press conference earlier. Brian Santiago taking over for Tom Holmoe. I've been a little bit surprised, and I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to put it. I'm not down there. I'm not behind closed doors. I've met Brian a handful of times. I've been a little bit surprised at the pushback this hire has received from a big portion of the community.
It's a very opinionated fan base who all thinks that they know someone who knows someone who knows who the right hire should be. the way you have to make your decisions now, if you're at BYU, but certainly if you're anywhere else, you got to hire the guy or the gal who can whisper your big donors.
Mm-hmm.
That's the criteria.
Yep.
And I guess at BYU, you got to make sure it's a guy who's not going to embarrass you on the church front as well. And Santiago's been down there long enough to know the score on that. Probably a safe hire in that regard. And that's the way you make these decisions moving forward in college sports, because that's what it's about.
It's really hard to be an athletic director with a massive, Q rating. It feels like that role, for the most part, always leaves people wanting. And I know Mark Harlan had a bit of a difficult year on a couple of different fronts. He's had to make a couple of different decisions that have not been all that popular. The basketball stuff hasn't been great since he took over, and he took over a football program that was self-sustainable. But it feels like there's a big portion of the Ute fan base that's kind of like, we're not really sure if this is the guy either. And Mark's always been good to me. I've got nothing personally bad to say about him. It's an interesting thing, though, because people take their sports so seriously. And as you reference about the BYU fan base, and I do think there's an element to sports fans that think they can do everybody's job better than the person that's actually doing that job, whether it's media, whether it's coaching, whether it's running a team or an athletic department. But it feels like, I don't know, maybe somebody was at the Wilk and Brian Santiago knocked their chocolate milk out of their hand or something. Like, it feels personal. You know, people have had, tense interactions with him. And I always get a kick out of this if somebody's hired and, you ran into them at the grocery store.
Cut in line for my cougar tails.
Exactly.
I'll never forgive him.
You're in line at the Marriott Center for some popcorn. You said hi to Brian Santiago, and he kept walking, so you don't like to hire. But to your point, even if this is a direct line to Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge, without Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge, Kevin Young's now the head coach at BYU. Mm-hmm. And we've seen what that has done in a year. So even if that is his only piece of criteria on his resume that makes sense, it is the biggest deal that you can have right now.
Here's what you need to do if you're a school now. Your athletic director has to be a shark, a killer, an executive, like a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not the most endearing personality in some situations. And then your GMs can be the popularity contest winners.
Mm-hmm.
You bring in Andrew Luck, who's a hyper-intelligent golden retriever puppy, to be your GM.
Right.
Everybody loves that guy.
Right.
The recruits want to be around that guy.
Yeah.
The donors want to have a conversation and a dinner with that guy. That's what you're looking for with your GMs. Popularity contest, not a contest that ADs need to win all the time.
Yeah, no, that's the point. Not their job. Okay, there's so many parts of the job you have to have locked in outside whether or not he makes you feel good about yourself.
And by the way, this is me saying all this stuff. I don't know how he's going to do in the job. Tom Homo was one of the best in the country at his job, whether you like me saying that or not, on the home of the Utes. Those are huge, huge shoes to fill. And I kind of hope he doesn't do that great at it, because BYU they're on a rise that makes me a little bit uncomfortable right now.
Yeah, he said it himself during his introductory press conference. This is kind of like a don't mess it up situation. Just keep the momentum going, because BYU's in a place. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, I have successfully robbed all of you of 6 hours of the drive with Spence Checketts.
Minutes.
6 minutes? Did I say hours?
You did. That would be a long radio show.
6
4 hours is long
of the
enough.
drive would be too much of me, that's for sure.
All good, buddy.
6 minutes. I owe those to Spence somehow.
You do not.
Stay tuned for the drive. Thanks for listening to the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.